for National Public Works Week. So just bear with me here. Proclamation, Township of Berkeley Heights. Whereas the American Public Works Association has celebrated National Public Works Week since 1960. And whereas public works professionals are the behind-the-scenes employees who focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to our community. And whereas the Township of Berkeley Heights Department of Public Works and wastewater treatment departments are a diverse, hardworking group of employees, including mechanics, equipment operators, building and ground maintenance workers, facility maintenance workers, sewer jet operators, and supervisors. And whereas these employees maintain our sewer system, public buildings, wastewater treatment plant, township streets, parks, grounds, and fields. And whereas the mayor and the township council believe it is important to recognize the contributions made by our public works employees to protect the safety, quality of life, and well-being of the residents of the township. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the mayor and the township council of the Township of Berkeley Heights hereby proclaim May 17th through the 23rd, 2020 as National Public Works Week. Approved this day, May 12th, 2020, signed by me. So just want to give a shout out to all of our public works employees who do such a great job, particularly in light of this pandemic. They've been amazing. And it's a great segue to just formally introduce Joe Bonacorso, who is on our Zoom. Joe, give a little wave so people know who you are, who is our contracted S4 license operator holding down the fort at the sewer plant while we are looking for a replacement. So welcome, Joe. This is the council. He's been doing a great job, and he's on mute.
Hold on. There you go.
Okay, here I am.
Welcome again.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've had the pleasure of working with some of your administrative staff. They are wonderful people, very knowledgeable, incredibly responsive. You guys should be really proud of the administrative staff that you have. I've been closely with Liza and Eugenia and a wonderful lady at the site itself, Linda Palumbo, who has been extraordinarily helpful, just routinely. I'm very pleased to be able to help. And I'm enjoying myself. I have fun.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe. Welcome aboard.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Okay, and we're going to switch things up a little bit. We are waiting for our redevelopment attorney to be available for our conference session. So we're going to go into regular agenda, the township council reports, and then we'll go back into conference session. So hopefully that doesn't knock us off kilter too much. But Gentiana, we'll start with you.
Hi, everybody. Just happy to see everyone on Zoom. Being a brand new council member here, it's and attending just 3 meetings in person before we went to isolation. It's a little strange, but I'm just as happy to see people and everybody, all the residents are joining on Zoom. So thank you for your patience. I'm super happy that the county parks are open. So it's more opportunity for you to enjoy your hikes and your walk and your bike rides with your children and get some fresh air. Hopefully the weather is going to warm up a little bit by the end of the month. Please continue to, just want to say that I continue to support the local businesses. Check out the list of all the businesses that are open in the township website. As part of the communication committee, just wanted to let you know that the regular newsletters are out there. So if you want to sign up, they have all the latest updates. So go to www.berkeleyheights.gov/sign-up. If you want to, for all of those that are tracking the COVID-19 statistics, there's also a separate page. You can still go to www.berkeleyheights.gov/COVID-19. With that, I'm going to conclude my report and, pass it on to Manny.
Thank you, Gentiana. Manny?
Snow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Luckily, we didn't have to call the OEM people out on Sunday. There's a squall came barreling through Berkeley Heights and left just as quickly. Second thing I want to mention is that the Berkeley Heights Library has a new music service called Freegal, F-R-E-E-G-A-L. And with the new music service, all you need is your library card and the last 4 digits of the phone number you registered with, and you can get download streaming, and it streams 24 hours a day. You're also allowed 3 downloads, I think, a week for free. So take a look at that, and that's about it for me.
That's great information. I did not know that. Excellent.
Manny, was it Freegal? Gal?
Yes.
Gal? Okay.
Free gal.
Free gal. Okay.
Free gal.
Excellent.
Free gal music. I was playing it all weekend. Pretty good eclectic mix. I was listening to the new Bob Dylan songs. So
Amazing.
there's some
Very good.
new and upcoming artists.
Grateful Dead, Manny.
Not as much as I'd like, but definitely was on. Did find one Bob Weir album, so it's okay.
All right.
Okay, great. All right, so on to Jean.
Okay, I'm going to be a little longer, unfortunately. In terms of downtown beautification, we did launch the Adopt a Sign. And I want to thank all of our returning groups and families that are continuing to love our signs. We had all but one group and or family step back up and volunteer. So again, thank you to everybody. If you look around, you can start to see some of the signs getting planted. And I want to thank our DPW for delivering the mulch this week. So once again, the town is providing the mulch and they will spread it. We closed down BH Bingo effective Monday morning, which was a great way for residents to help support our local businesses, but it's not too late to submit your proof. You can send your pictures of your bingo tiles to dbc@bhtwp.com. We will announce the winners on Friday. So far, I think most residents, or at least half the residents, have had their bulk pickup. I again want to remind residents that if you've not already paid your second quarter property taxes, please do so. This entire council has worked extremely hard to develop a budget that does not increase local taxes and does not cut any services. So we need you all to do your part now and pay your property taxes by June 1st. Over the last several weeks, I've spoken to several of our local businesses about their current financial issues they're facing. And, you know, through my relationship with the DBC, I've had many years of working with these businesses. Yesterday, I helped put together a call with Assemblyman John Bramnick so that some of the local business owners could actually have a real contact at the state assembly to help get them some resolutions to the issues that they're facing. What was crystal clear from this call is that these businesses really need to reopen back up ASAP, and they need all of us to support them when we do. Assemblyman Bramnick was great. He's always looked out for Berkeley Heights. He is laser focused on this small business reopening. He and Sweeney, the leader of the state Senate, are united and working with the governor to get our small business reopened in a reasonable, rational, and safe manner. And we all do know how to practice social distancing. We are going to have to respect this so that we can successfully help get our local businesses to what we consider the new normal. Another way I think we can talk about helping our small businesses would be to defer the plastic bag ordinance that we passed earlier this year and potentially revisit it at a later date. I think given the issues with COVID, I feel strongly that we need to re-examine this position and give our small businesses some financial relief on the issue. And then as the only sitting council person that's been a part of this Connell rezoning application over the last 5 years, I just want to take a minute and provide some background on the history of this project for the residents. As part of the affordable housing litigation in 2015, the council entered into an agreement with Connell to rezone one of the existing blocks of land, which was an ORA zone, to allow for a mixed use zone that would include 312 multifamily units and 45,000 square feet of retail and outdoor space. This agreement was later memorialized in a developer's agreement with Connell in October of 2016. The agreement also called for Connell to then provide affordable housing units within the township, but not on the property. In August 2017, Connell came before the council with a revised plan that expanded their concept of a work, live, play corporate park. The vision was to develop the ORA and ORB, which is the property the hotel and the restaurant are on, collectively into a mixed use area that would include multifamily residents, retail, and other amenities. Part of this vision then included the creation of the Grove, which was their outdoor park and a walking trail that was to be used by both the Connell Center residents and the BH community. This revised plan, including rezoning ORA and B, and created the third zone, ORA1. With the expanded vision for the property, they were increasing the residential units to 328, and it included 45 affordable units to be put on site. The council and the advisors worked hard with Connell at that time to balance the amount of retail space allowed on the property, and the limit was then established at 85,000 square feet. When the rezoning was discussed with the council and the public, there was a significant amount of discussion regarding traffic that the proposed zoning could have. At that time, the council was advised that they would not require off-site traffic improvements. They could not require the off-site traffic improvements as part of a rezoning ordinance. Rather, the traffic issues would have to be addressed as part of a site plan approval, and that was the responsibility of the planning board. Myself and the entire governing body did make it clear that we would work with the planning board at the time to review the appropriate traffic studies and make sure that all traffic improvements were included as a condition for the site plan approval. In 2018, Connell opened the Grove, the first piece of their work, live, play community concept that would be open to the public. And so far it's hosted Vegan Fest, the yoga evening, and the October concert in the park. In 2019, the Connell came forward again to the council with a revised and expanded vision for their corporate center. The rezoning ordinance that's being introduced on the agenda today is a result of these discussions between this governing body, our professionals, and Connell. Thanks.
Okay,
That's
so, okay. Wasn't sure if that was a hard stop.
Hard stop, done.
Okay, very good. Alvaro?
So let me start by talking about Memorial Day. So this is this year, as you can imagine, we are, and as most people know, we will not have a parade. However, the VFW members, the traditional leaders of that event, Dennis Ryan, Tom Barton, and the members of the VFW met, and together also with Sergeant Fettis of the police department, and have come up with a unique solution that I think that was announced actually over the weekend in both TAP and in Berkeley Heights announcements if you didn't see it. The theme is Operation 2020. We remember the fallen by honoring the living. And it will consist of two parts. The first will be a ceremony, quote unquote, private, of VFW members. So it's going to be a very few, less than 10 members of the VFW. They'll meet at Veterans Memorial Field at 9 a.m. And they'll go through a lowering of the flag to half mast, reading of the names, elevation of the memorial wreath to the monuments. At the end of the ceremony, the veterans will return to their homes. Part two will consist of a first responder drive-by of the veterans' homes starting at about 10:30. The PBA, who's sponsoring this event, is looking to include all veterans and asking that they identify themselves online or via or by calling a phone number, which I'll give you, 908-771-2065. So I'm looking forward to this revised, toned down, and safety-oriented event. Actually, the mayor and I will be meeting with the members of the VFW and Mr. Ryan on Thursday on site to be sure that we coordinate a properly safe experience. So that's Memorial Day. I also want to talk about the Environmental Commission. I've reported on that for a while. But of course, one of the major topics confronting them or that they've been considering is the single-use plastic ordinance that we voted in earlier this year. There's a lot of concern among council members as well as the public about the reuse of plastic bag or reusable bags during the COVID pandemic. Some of the things that are being considered is educating the public about cleaning reusable bags, but there's also an initiative to investigate research into COVID transmission via reusable bags. There's a lot of publication, not all of it entirely accurate, about the effects of reusing reusable bags. However, our surrounding towns, Summit principally, whose ordinance went into effect May 1st, have elected not to enforce their ordinance until further notice. I think, as you know, our ordinance is not effective until December 1st. However, I think out of consideration for the challenges that businesses are facing today under the circumstances, we too should announce that we will not enforce the ban until further notice. I don't know what the correct process would be to do that, but I wholly encourage us to take that step. Additional activity on the Environmental Commission, they're working with Tom Bacco on a bid, hire a vendor to treat trees in town for the emerald ash borer, which has been pretty devastating and which causes the the need of taking down trees. The treatment is only preventative. A tree that's infected would need to be cut. The funding for the treatment will come out of the tree fund that the Environmental Commission manages. It'll cost about $12,000 a year over the next 2 years. But the cost of treating those trees is far lower than what it would cost to take them down. So hopefully we can get ahead of that. The Environmental Commission has also been working with Liza Viana, our administrator, to solve a less costly way of relocating a lot of unusable earth at the municipal complex. That's it's a lengthy process to go through that, but they're working on it. The commission voted at its last meeting to postpone the Vegan Fest. So there will not be a Vegan Fest in 2020. It'll be moved until 2021. They're hopeful of retaining the offer of Brown to provide to cover the cost of that. And I don't know if they gained that assurance.
Yes, but that's covered.
Okay. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on is that I did also attend the Economic Development Committee meeting, and I don't know if Angie will talk about more about that. About a week ago last Thursday, we meet again this coming Thursday. And the reason I mention it is I was just struck that the purpose of the meeting really was to gather a sense of how businesses are doing, how they're being able to manage, how they're able to utilize the funding that's available to them either formally or informally. And I think the takeaway that I had is that not very well. The public funding that's been provided, the PPP as it's known, is very difficult for small businesses to benefit from. And I think the stories that I heard during that meeting were pretty stunning, where you spend hours preparing a submission and you're off by a couple of decimal points and you have to start over again. And I know businesses that have received much larger businesses who actually don't need it, who have received direct funding from their banks because they had a relationship. And so I know that it's not being very well administered. And so I second Gentiana's recommendation, as well as Jean's, that businesses in Berkeley Heights really, really need a helping hand. They're in devastated circumstances, and we really have to do whatever we can to support them. So that's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Very good. Thank you.
That's one question, Alvaro. Are they going to Zoom that private ceremony, or is it?
No, we looked into doing that with the couple of different resources. So the high school, the preferred resources with GLTV, high school is just not able to provide anybody on site.
Okay.
So it is going to be entirely private.
Hold on, so just one sec. Sergeant Fettis is going to video because he will be a part of it, also to help with crowd control. So we will post that on after the fact. And I had a discussion with him, and we even thought about, not doing it live, as not to encourage people who just to go, unfortunately, right? So.
Okay, so as long as we can note that people, they can watch it later on Memorial, will they put it up that same day?
We'll try to get it up as soon as everything is concluded.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. That's great. Thank you.
I just don't know if you know that Zoom does have a recording tool, or they got to film it with a camera.
I think we're going to just use an iPhone, because we were even talking about using our camera, but the Wi-Fi and the electric, and it's just cleaner to just, and again, not encouraging people to come and congregate, for all the right reasons. I'm sure they're patriotic, they want to participate, but we want to really, adhere to the governor's executive order.
Absolutely.
So it's tough. We've a lot of back and forth. It's tough, but it's a somber, important day, and they need to celebrate. So with that, I think it's your turn, right? Your report.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So I want to give a shout out to all the Berkeley Heights teachers and nurses. Last week was both Teacher Appreciation Week as well as Nurses Appreciation Week. And it's been a challenging time for teachers and nurses to educate remotely. My first committee report is the Grants Committee. The First Responder Grant has been submitted. Chief Padavana reached out to us to apply for a First Responder Grant, and Adam Yanis, a member of the FD and our Grants Committee, submitted the grant yesterday. the AARP grant. They give grants to communities that want to make their community more livable for seniors who want to age in place. And our members, Judy Sills and Kathy Dannenberg, have taken on this grant. It's due on the 15th, and I know they will successfully turn that in. Littell Lord, the New Jersey Historic Trust grant, is due on June 4th now, so I have a little more time, but the pieces are coming together and it will be submitted on time. The planning board met May 6th. There were 2 different presentations made by our planner, Keenan Hughes. The first was for rezoning Connell, and Jean gave you a background on that tonight, so thank you, Jean. And it was clear from the results of the master plan, that the working document, that this rezoning is integral to the vision for the future of Berkeley Heights. The proposed rezoning will allow Connell to build a mixed-use live, work, play, stay environment that can enhance the livability of the town. And according to the planner, amending the existing development standards will reduce the allowable square footage and future office space, and create a more balanced and desirable mix of land use. And we can actually lessen the overall impact of traffic and provide open spaces to all residents of Berkeley Heights. So he did his presentation. The planning board had a lot of questions and comments, and there was some discussion. And the planning board unanimously voted to move forward on the rezoning of the Connell area. And it's just one step in this process. And the next step tonight is the first reading of the ordinance before council. The second vote that night was on a lot adjacent to Berkeley Crossing, the redevelopment area that was studied, and it's recommended to be a non-condemnation area in need of redevelopment. And it's going to be added to the Berkeley Crossing redevelopment area, which is 4 other lots. And this lot kind of completes the whole picture. So what's going to happen is this additional land, which now has a freestanding house, will square off the redevelopment area and allow for an efficiently designed 3-story building with an enclosed parking garage. And this will also provide additional affordable housing units within the redevelopment. Our planner concluded that the inclusion is necessary to facilitate the redevelopment of the Berkeley Crossing redevelopment area. And this vote also went before the board. After a little discussion, the planning board passed this 8-0 as well. Madam Mayor, I just want to start a discussion on an idea I had, the social distancing environment that we live, and residents have been saying that they want adult recreation. And so one resident mentioned disc golf, and Mr. Pogue is a disc golf player, so I reached out to him to get some information. So a disc golf course has many health, or the activity has many health benefits, both physical and mental. And the research right now is many people are struggling with, mental issues, and they have a lot of stress. It builds an appreciation of nature, provides an exercise outlet, allows players to be part of a community, confidence, patience. It decreases stress, increases problem-solving skills, and provides a break from the daily routine. I did a little research on the disc golf, and if we're interested, we can do a test course for as little as $500 to gauge interest. And then if you go for a deluxe 18-hole course, it's $15,000, but a 9-hole course would be half of that. So in terms of maintenance, a lot of communities do the active players, scouts, and service clubs are a reliable source. And you need about 1 to 1.5 acres per hole. So the township could decide if they wanted a 9-hole course or an 18-hole course. You need you need very little materials. So it's an inexpensive to build and play. It's rapidly growing, and courses bring people into your town, which would mean maybe they would come and have lunch or have a beer after. It can be played by almost everyone. It promotes exercise and a healthy lifestyle. And what you need is some land and baskets, tee pads, and signage. And again, for an actual test course, they said you can use just different baskets and hang them on poles just to see if there's interest in people coming. And then you would commit to about $3,500 for a basic 9-hole course. They wind through wooded areas, and we certainly have plenty of those. So I just wanted to throw it out there as kind of an idea as we move forward from this pandemic time. And that's
so the county recreation director, and I'm not really sure where it stood because here we are, pandemic, right? That happened. They were looking at potential areas in Berkeley Berkeley Heights for exactly this. So
Oh, good.
I will follow up and find out what's going on with that, but you made put a smile on my face because I didn't know what it was until he called and explained it to me. So I will follow up on that.
Now, Mr. Pogue enjoys it. And again, you're outside, you're breathing fresh air, you're having a little exercise, and you're improving your coordination skills and decreasing stress. So it's a win-win.
It's not
My report.
it's disc golf, right?
Well, you
Not-
can't call it frisbee golf because frisbee is a trademark, so it's called disc golf. And it's good because you use your own frisbee, you don't share materials, so it's a good social distancing.
I mean, they play it in Chicago. So, I mean, you could do it, I would think, in less than an acre per spot, because my nephew's a huge disc golf fan and he plays in downtown Chicago in a park somewhere.
Well, you absolutely can. They recommend 1 acre, but they do recommend you, if you have a wooded area that you wind through the woods, and you only need like a surface where the tee is.
Right.
You don't have to have a path. You're just walking through the woods. You get to the tee. The tee is either rubber or concrete, and then you have this basket on a pole.
Right.
Yep.
So
It almost reminds me of playing bocce as a kid, and the idea that you could go from different stop to stop along that. So this sounds great.
the one thing they did recommend was good signage, because then you can have a tournament, and when you have a tournament, again, you bring people into your town, and they shop and eat and hang out.
I mean, I know the Rec Commission is working on their master plan and ideas. I think this is something that potentially something you should take to the next meeting, Susan. I know you have a lot of meetings to go to, but
Yeah, but on Zoom, it's easy.
yeah, or at least email Ed Galatelli and say, can you guys think about this as your meeting?
Absolutely. Thanks. And that concludes my report.
Very good. Thank you, Susan. Stephen?
Do you want me to defer now that our attorney has joined us?
No, let's finish reports and then I don't want to skip around. Let's finish this whole chunk and then we'll.
Quickly, I had this update from the Veterans Memorial Committee, but Alvaro and others have discussed the Memorial Day plan, so that's off the table. The Communications Committee, in addition to what was mentioned by Gatiana, with regards to our social media, the Communications Committee has been doing regular updates on our Facebook and our Instagram pages, including a very nice graphic of all of us as local officials who are probably wearing our masks as a joint one. So I want to thank Lucinda Hayes for designing that. We have the local business directories to help residents know what is open and how to work with local businesses during this, obviously very difficult time. And you can find that at berkeleyheights.gov/eatlocal and berkeleyheights.gov/shoplocal. And finally, the Communications Committee has worked with the BBC, the Beautification Committee, to help promote the BH Bingo Challenge. I want to also just agree with Mrs. Kingsley and Council President Daros and others. I have also been speaking to a number of business owners in the community in recent weeks, and they likewise expressed similar concerns to me regarding the plastic bag ban. And while ours would not take effect until December anyway, I agree with the Council President that I think this would be the prudent action to take at this time. I believe that concludes my report.
Thank you, Stephen. Administration reports, my report. I'll try to be brief. I know we have a 3-page agenda tonight, so I'm continuing to participate on our regular OEM calls. We're going to go to every other day this week to just sort of wind it down a little. County calls will no longer be on weekends, and the governor's office actually gave us off from Mother's Day, so that was a nice surprise. We got Saturday afternoon. I want to take, in that vein, I want to take a moment to really laud and commend our fire chief, who is also our OEM coordinator. Tony Padovano is working 24/7 for this community. He responds to, I speak to him multiple times a day. He responds to phone calls from, senior residents, that have questions or are upset about issues related to COVID. He is regularly visiting our LTCs and our senior housing. When there's a report that, maybe someone at a gas station attendant isn't wearing a mask, he makes sure that he goes over there and delivers those masks. He really is giving 500%, 1,000% of himself in these days. So he really deserves that recognition today. As Alvaro, I think, mentioned, we will hold a economic development committee on Thursday. It was sort of heart-wrenching to hear some of the trials and tribulations that our businesses are going through. We did try to get this committee back up and are meeting on a more regular basis to try to identify what we can do as a community, what we can do as a governing body to help them. I know I asked Manny to take the lead on looking at an ordinance that would give us some flexibility with outdoor seating of our restaurants so they can socially distance a little bit more. We did have a call with one of our restaurant owners with some of our planner and some others to start to think about preliminary plans that they can submit to our OEM folks who have to be comfortable, both our OEM coordinator, our health officer, and of course our police chief, to make sure that we're doing this in a safe way. But we're trying to think about what the next steps are going to be. Related to the business community, I also want to laud the efforts of the Berkeley Heights Business and Civic Association. As of last Wednesday, I was told that they raised $45,000 for 45 businesses. And then the day of giving also occurred, which was a $25,000 fundraising effort to be matched by the Connell Company by an additional $25,000. So that's a significant amount of money in a short period of time. So that's excellent. Liza and I have been talking to the YMCA about virtual programming and how to help partner with them so they can relaunch after this global pandemic, or what how they're going to exist in this environment. Finally, some good news. Liza, Eugenia, and I had a conference call with the county officials today about the COVID money. I think there was about $98 million that came into Union County. It hasn't yet been released because of the regulations. There wasn't a whole lot of guidance. So we will have an intake form that we will submit to the county to try to identify which expenses will be paid for per the federal regulations, per the CARES Act. So that process has started. I know that Eugenia has been keeping a comprehensive log of that. So I'm hopeful that we'll get some of that operating money back. We also talked about going through maybe a second round of those funds for things that we're going to incur as part of capital costs. For example, we might need plastic windows or plexiglass windows, for our public spaces once we get in the new buildings, so we can socially distance when residents come in, they feel safe and our employees feel safe. And a litany of other things, capital improvements that we're going to have to make as part of this global pandemic world. And the only other thing I want to mention, because I need the help of the council, is that I did speak to Tony right before this council meeting, and we're looking to do some sort of resident clap for our healthcare workers and our first responders. And we're talking about having some of the first responders maybe drive past some of our healthcare facilities, but I think it would be a wonderful gesture if we could get township residents at a certain time to come out and clap like they're doing in other communities. It's been on my mind, but Tony sort of called and I said, let's marry these two together. So, if all of you would help, I think we can push that information out and make it a really...
on that, Angie, there are neighborhoods in town that at 7 o'clock, so the cities are doing 7 p.m. every night.
Yes, New York City is doing it, yes.
Yeah, and there are neighborhoods around here, like I know Sutton and Whitney, for one I've walked by, they do it at 7 o'clock every night religiously. So I think if we're going to do anything, why not get the whole town at 7 o'clock one night? Because that's the shift change. So people are switching, coming home, and I would try to stick to the same time and just get everybody to do it. You'll hear the sound all over town.
And
yeah, let's just hope our governor is not going to come with another executive order to ban the clapping as well. So
I think we'll be okay if we stand on our porch and clap.
Yeah, but I think you get people to do cowbells and they're bang their pots, and I think you could, the whole town, you'd hear it. It'd be really great.
I think that would be a wonderful gesture and showing our appreciation. And then final thought, I just want to wish a happy belated Mother's Day to Susan, Jean, Gentiana, Liza, and all of our wonderful mothers, employees, Anna, Barbara, and our residents. And with that concludes my report. Liza.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you.
Okay, I also want to welcome Joe, our temporary sewer director. We've been working closely with him and our wastewater crew to get a full view of what may need to be fixed or repaired this year to keep our facilities working in good order, which segues me to please do not throw anything besides toilet paper down the toilet. Tissues, paper towels, Susan?
Yeah, so I have a video. If you check out my council page, I did a little video right from my bathroom here about things that you can and cannot throw down the toilet. And the only thing you should be throwing down the toilet is toilet paper. Everything
Right.
else is a no-no.
So now that toilet paper is not in as much of a shortage as we had before, hopefully this will not be an issue, but the last thing anyone needs while they're shut in is their system backing up. So that is a very real threat. So please, and even if they're flushable baby wipes, that's a big lie. They're not really flushable. So please.
That's part of my video too. Check it out. It says flushable, but they're not.
Yes. DPW, in the past 2 weeks, they've patched 6.16 tons of potholes. Today they were working on the library lot. Even though the library is not open, a lot of kids and their parents are now using it for biking and walking. So we wanted to patch that up. Completed section 3 of chipping and is now chipping in section 4. Please make sure to have all your sticks out the first day of your section schedule. We're cleaning up leaves and debris at our parks, fixing basins and replacing head walls. Street sweeping, we've swept sections 1 through 4 and we began in section 3. We've collected about 27 yards of debris. All the regular lawn cutting and maintenance and replacing and repairing signs and whatnot, and also taking care of the welcome to BH signs that Councilman Kingsley mentioned. So I also want to mention the light at Snyder and Locust. Construction is underway there. The light should be installed in about 3 weeks. So we're working with the light installer to make sure that goes as expeditiously as possible. The shared services group that we kicked off with 13 other BAs in 4 counties got a little bit derailed with the onset of COVID, but we did the reboot yesterday. So this group consists of 13 BAs in Morris, Union, Somerset, and Essex, so 4 different counties. We had some great ideas on budget forecasting in the midst of COVID, potential areas of cost savings. The state is really encouraging sharing services now more than ever, particularly with towns that are adjacent or very close to each other. What that's also great for hearing what other towns are doing in terms of scaling back or planning for the future, because we may not know if there's a second wave of COVID in the fall or the winter. Just getting a better grasp from what others are doing in terms of preparing their buildings, like the mayor said, installing the plexiglass in the windows that are most frequented by our residents, and making sure the safety of our employees and the residents are taken into full account. So while we also have weekly calls with our Union County administrators, this is a great chance to see what other counties are doing. So it's very, very helpful for us in terms of how we manage the day-to-day and personnel and just logistics of keeping government services running. Redevelopment, we're working to get all the redevelopment projects moving so that the township can start realizing that revenue, because that is going to be needed now more than ever. I do want to mention that we seem to be in a better position than a lot of other towns because we do have these revenue sources coming online in the next year or 2. So this year's tight, but hopefully after that, it'll loosen up a little bit. Plastic bags, please, please, please do not leave your thin film plastic in piles in front of town hall. There's been a mountain left there in the past few days. The collection has been suspended. Please keep it at home. Don't throw it out. Keep it at home until we resume that collection. Bulk pickup, please don't freak out. If you see the bulk pickup truck, come to your section a day or 2 early. They are a little bit ahead of schedule, but they're also collecting more than ever because everybody's home and they're cleaning stuff out. So instead of taking breaks in between their sections like they were scheduled to, they're just moving on to the next section, but they will always come back to the scheduled streets on those days. So don't worry.
Wait, so Liza, are you saying that they're actually coming up early and then coming back the day that they're supposed to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Can
because
we put it on the website?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think you sent us something a couple days ago, but I think we're gonna have to send it out periodically just to remind everyone. Yes, exactly. The tonnage that they're taking on this year is historic, so they need the extra trips. And Smart 911 sign up, this is on our website. This is a new notification system that allows residents to stay informed of the emergency updates from the police department, Office of Emergency Management. That's also where you sign up to get the calls that the mayor has been putting out on COVID. You know, that is not very frequently. It's mainly for emergencies, but it's location based and there's an app. So please check that out. And then
one thing on that, Liza.
Yep, go ahead.
because I did sign up for that, and it's a tremendous, it's a really good, useful app. I'd encourage everybody to do it, not just for the reasons that she gave, but when you sign up for that, if you have an accident and call from that phone, the 911 operator knows exactly where you are, as opposed to triangulating depending on where you are relative to the cell tower. So there's a lot more accuracy. They can respond a lot faster, and there's a place where you can provide information about yourself in case you have any medical conditions that the responders need to know about. The operator will have that in the database. So I really encourage everybody to do that.
Thanks, Alvaro. Yeah, it's a great tool. And lastly, cloth washable masks for seniors. We're encouraging any senior over the age of 70 who needs a mask to contact Neighbors Helping Neighbors at 908-312-2066 or bhhelpingneighbors@gmail.com. In addition, this group can assign a phone buddy. We're getting a lot of calls to town hall, and we're hearing from others. A lot of people are really, the isolation is really getting to them, especially perhaps the elderly who don't have other people in the home with them, other family members, and they just want someone to talk to. So if you call this number, they will set you up with a buddy who will call you once or twice a week just to check in and see how you're doing. And I think they'll go a long way towards this, vulnerable part of our population to not feeling so isolated. So please, please, please take advantage of the service. That's it. Thank you.
Before we wind up the report, so I just wanted to, as someone who is very vocal about the bag ban, I'm back to using plastic myself because I know that that's the healthiest way to go now. And I am gathering all my plastic in the garage for when we can go back to that. So I just wanted to say, thank you, Jean and Alvaro and Stephen, for mentioning it. And we have to keep everyone safe. That's the most important thing.
And can I ask one more question? I forgot. Last time we had all talked boxcar and the vegetable delivery. And I wanted to order and I just haven't heard anything. So where are we with that? I forgot to ask.
So former Mayor Cohen and our township attorney had a conversation, and we had a text exchange last night, and I said, can we revisit this on Wednesday? I think we just have to write the executive order.
Okay. Yeah, because I know Milburn and Cranford, some of the other towns, they've expanded it to not just the vegetables with Boxcar, but Boxcar's partnered with some of the local businesses that didn't have delivery options, and they're helping these businesses to package their food and deliver. So I think, the sooner we can get them in, we can. It might be another tool to just keep helping our businesses further.
Sure.
One thing that's come out of all this is the creativity.
Is Craig on mute?
Nope, I can hear everyone. I'm not on mute, I don't think. Can you hear me?
Is it just a matter of writing the executive order at this point?
That and confirming the location is going to be, that might be the greater logistical issue, which we can discuss tomorrow.
Okay, because there's a private location too, just to make it easier if we need to.
Yeah, that could make it easier, actually.
Okay, perfect, thank you. All right.
That's it.
Motion to, yep.
Okay, then make a motion that move that all accounts. I move that all township official reports be accepted and approved.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Brahimai?
Yes.
Mr. Kudo?
Yes.
Mrs. Kingsley?
Yes.
Mr. Maderos?
Yes.
Mrs. Pogue?
Yes.
Mr. Yellen?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to go back to the conference session. I suppose we should start with Matt because I can see Matt.
Hi, Matt.
Hello, everyone. How are we doing?
Matt Jessup, our redevelopment attorney, is going to give us a presentation on the Mondelli redevelopment project and update related to the pilot negotiations. Is that right?
Sure. That sounds good.
Well, you can update us on a number of things, I'm sure.
Yeah, so Mondelli. Hello, everyone. Mayor, Council. Good to see you all. Mondelli project, of course, located on Plainfield Avenue, sort of across from where we should and wish we all were tonight. The redeveloper of this project is Elite Properties. The property consists of a multifamily rental housing development, one building, 10 residential apartment units, of which 2 will be set aside for affordable housing obligations. The public park, the Mondelli Public Park, that will be part of this project, 10,000 square foot park next to the residential, and then on-site parking and some on and off-site infrastructure. The property was originally referred by the township to the planning board for study as an area in need of redevelopment back in July of 2018. In May of 2019, the planning board recommended to the Township Council that the property be designated as an area in need of redevelopment, sort of following the statutory back and forth process between the Township and the planning board. So after the planning board made that recommendation to the council to declare the property an area in need, the next step should have been that the Township Council adopts a resolution declaring the Mondelli property as an area in need of redevelopment in response to the planning board's positive recommendation. But a certain redevelopment council never prepared or sent that resolution to the governing body. And as a result of my oversight, the Township Council has actually not formally declared that property as an area in need of redevelopment yet. The good news is there's a pretty simple remedy for that. We propose to fix that tonight with adoption of a resolution number 2 in your agenda, which would formally declare the property an area in need of redevelopment. So picking up as if the township had declared the property an area in need of redevelopment, in October of 2019, the township adopted a redevelopment plan for the property that was prepared by Keen and Hughes. Again, the problem here is you're not supposed to adopt a redevelopment plan until you already have a redevelopment area. And as we just established, we didn't yet have a redevelopment area. So we're also remedying this portion of the original problem by an ordinance tonight. I believe that's ordinance number 2 tonight, which would readopt effectively the redevelopment plan. So my procedural missteps aside, the redeveloper for this project, once we have an area and a plan, is going to be seeking a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes for this project. We anticipate receiving the redeveloper's pilot application in the coming weeks. The last sort of step that they're working on is actually creating the company, the urban renewal entity that the party to the financial agreement and will ultimately be in charge of redeveloping the property. So just a reminder, a pilot is like a tax dollar, except that the division of the dollar amongst the taxing districts is different. So instead of 18% of a tax dollar going to the township, with the balance largely going to the county and the Board of Ed, very little bit going to the Open Space Trust Fund and the library. With a pilot, the township keeps 95% of each tax dollar, and the county keeps the remaining 5%. So for those that at the council level that haven't been through this process before from the beginning, when a redeveloper seeks a pilot, the redeveloper is required to submit a complete pro forma of their project, a financial pro forma of their project as part of their pilot application, which they have to formally submit to the mayor. The mayor then makes a recommendation of the governing body, and then you all would act on that pilot. The pro forma typically shows redevelopers' estimated construction costs, which are certified by an architect or an engineer, redevelopers' revenue assumptions. What are they going to charge for rent? In this case, it's all residential, for 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, for the affordable units versus the market rate units. Are they charging any extra rental fees for pets, storage, bike fees, etc., parking? And then the pro forma also shows the redeveloper's assumption for cost to operate the project once it's complete, right? What are the annual operating expenses that they have to pay in order to run the facility? So by submitting that application for a pilot, the redeveloper is basically saying, based on the construction costs, based on the revenues and the OpEx, the operating expenses, if the redeveloper had to pay conventional taxes, the project wouldn't be built. They couldn't afford it. No bank would give them a loan, and they wouldn't risk their equity for what would be too small of a return. It's not worth it. So in Berkeley Heights, when we do get one of those pro formas, we get one of those pilot applications, we don't just take the redeveloper at their word on their construction costs, their operating expenses, and their revenue assumptions. Obviously, when negotiating a pilot, it's to the developer's interest to have construction costs be high, have revenues look low, have operating expenses look high. So we don't just take their word for it. The township engages Paul Beiser from Integra Realty Resources, who vets and scrubs the pro forma for the township's benefit. So you have someone on your side saying the construction cost numbers are too high, right? Stick doesn't cost that much, concrete doesn't cost that much, et cetera. Your revenues may be understated. We think 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom units in Berkeley Heights, you're going to get, $2,200 per unit, not $1,800 per unit. So Paul goes through and really vets the pro forma and sort of keeps the developer honest in the negotiation on the pilot. And of course, the goal really is to find that spot where the project is successful, the developer is making money, but of course, we are then getting what we believe is our fair share of the pilot revenue coming out of that project. So statutorily, that pilot can be a percentage of annual gross revenues. All gross revenues of the projects, the rents, the pet fee, the storage fee, et cetera, regardless of what the expenses are, just a percentage of the revenues. And statutorily, that can't be less than 10% of annual gross revenue. Based on the pro forma that has been received to date and our discussions with the redeveloper, we are anticipating when the redeveloper files their application, they'll be filing an application with a pilot equal to 11% of annual gross revenue, a little bit higher than the statutory minimum. Under that math, the pilot would equate net of the 5% to the county to $26,278 in the first year of stabilized operations. Currently, the municipality is receiving $1,480 in annual taxes on that property. So a jump of just shy of $24,800 or so in additional revenue once the project is complete. At a 2% per year increase, which prior to mid-March was certainly not unreasonable, that's about $1 million in municipal revenue over the 30-year term of the pilot. In addition, it's important to note that the redeveloper is constructing the park at its own cost. They're taking on all the costs to construct the park. And then once it's complete, they're conveying the park to the township free of charge. In addition, the redeveloper will be undertaking typical annual ongoing maintenance of the park, which per the developer's pro forma is a $35,000 a year expense. Obviously, if you guys were to build the park and maintain the park, you might expect to have a similar expense that you would have to pick up in your budget, and the developer's gonna be paying for that. So you're getting the project, you're getting a pilot with additional tax revenue on top of obviously what you're getting today. You're getting a park that they're gonna be ultimately constructing for you, and then you're getting typical ongoing maintenance, lawn, paving, snow, things like that. Any bigger term capital projects, the gazebo needs substantial rehab, that will likely fall back to the township as it would in any other park as a more significant capital improvement, but the annual ongoing expenses are going to be paid for by the developer as well. The pilot is memorialized in the terms of a financial agreement, which we put before the council by ordinance. The draft is pretty much final, so you should be seeing that in the next day or so in advance of what we hope is the meeting in 2 weeks when the developer has the URE created. But if not, it'll be the next meeting after that as soon as that URE is ready to go. So we'll see where that falls. What we do expect is that the redevelopment agreement, which I know you're familiar with in general, will govern the terms of construction, the timetable for construction, the obligation to do the park, and some other on and off site improvements. That we expect to be before you by resolution at your next council meeting. In addition, we expect the consistency review resolution, which has you, the governing body, determining that their site plan is consistent with the redevelopment plan. And Keenan Hughes, who I know is on, will be available to talk you through that analysis as he has with past projects. So the redevelopment agreement and the consistency review determination, we certainly expect to have at your next meeting, meaning this project is moving forward. Again, you'll see official action in 2 weeks to get this project going and get that park and the actual residential project built as well.
Yeah, I just have a question. Did you say URE as an acronym?
I did. I'm sorry. URE is Urban Renewal Entity. So under the long-term tax exemption law, only an urban renewal entity can receive a pilot. So typically what happens is the developer might, in this case, is Berkeley Crossing 2 LLC, which is again an LLC by Elite Properties, the developer, the larger parent developer. They will then turn that Berkeley Crossing 2 LLC into a New Jersey urban renewal entity, and it will become Berkeley Crossing 2 Urban Renewal LLC. And that urban renewal entity, which is a limited profit entity, is the one that actually will be the party to the financial agreement, and typically also a party to the redevelopment agreement at the same time.
I have one more question. So you mentioned the 2 affordable housing units. Are those 2 still going to be moved to the other property?
So they will have the option to do that. So as a reminder, that's a great point, Councilwoman. I appreciate it. Originally, these 2 unit affordable housing units were scheduled to, instead of being built at the Mondelli site, because it is such a small project, obviously 10 units is not a big project, as you all know, given the other projects that you're working on. Those 2 units contractually were allowed to be moved over to the Elite Berkeley Florist site. And in fact, the council entered into a redevelopment agreement with Elite for the Elite Berkeley Florist site late maybe of 2018 or so. And in that agreement, it does permit the Berkeley Florist site to take on those other 2 units. And of course, at the time, it looked like the Berkeley Florist site would be constructed ahead of the Mondelli site. And as a result, that unit swap was okay. Because at the end of the day, what we have to make sure of is that those 2 units get built one way or the other. If the Berkeley Florist site gets built first, these 2 units can go there. As we know, we've been talking about the Elite Berkeley Florist site, took a half step back. Last week, an additional lot was included, recommended by the planning board to be included as an area needed redevelopment. So that site is now a half a step behind this one. And so again, to ensure that those 2 units are built, contractually, we're saying basically, if the Mondelli site is built first, they've got to go in Mondelli. But then if you do ultimately build the Berkeley Florist site, and we certainly expect that they will, you are permitted to then move them over. And the 8 units market rate in this project would become 10 units of market rate at that point. And the other 2 units would be housed over at the Berkeley Florist site.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any updates on the pilot for Berkeley Florist site? Is that still in place? Any changes anticipated? I know the timing's delayed.
No, not at this time. The focus really has been on the Berkeley Florist site. The focus has really been on the project itself, ensuring that we can get to a project that is obviously constructible, and the addition of that lot 3, which was again considered by the planning board last week, and we anticipate would be before you all in 2 weeks from tonight. That has really been the focus. So we would anticipate that once those issues are resolved, we would see a new pro forma, and we would basically be reevaluating the Berkeley Florist project as a whole from a pilot perspective.
Got it. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, Matt, I think you're going to hang around just in case there's other questions about other projects.
Yep, sure.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you, Matt.
Liza, do we have Ted?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes, we do. Let me just make sure they're all unmuted. All right, I got Ted, Eric. All right, Sean.
Okay.
So let me start.
I was going to say, good evening, Ted Domaraki from MAST. Ted's going to give us some background information about the budget and kind of where we've been and how we are here today and some of the tough decisions that we may have to make.
Okay, so let me give you a little project overview. I want to start about where we are today, how we got here, and where we're going. And then I want to go over a brief financial overview that Sean has 3 slides that are going to show the source and use of funds for the amount of change orders, where the money was spent, the sources of those change orders, and the value of the negotiations that occurred. The project, in terms of its completeness, there's really have to look at the project as 2 phases, a core and shell, and then the fit out of the interiors. We were behind the entire project with bricks and mortar. We need to finish the brick and mortar and the windows. Once that occurs, and that's about 3 weeks away, you can start an interiors program for your finishes to complete the building. 3 weeks ago, we had a principals meeting, and Epic, who is the redeveloper and also the general contractor responsible for care, custody, and control of the project, and also for means and methods, suggested that there were a few open change orders that needed to be resolved for them to gear up for this final phase of the interiors of the construction. We subsequently met the following week and settled all the change orders that are up for approval this evening. And they committed to gear up to full force to finish the project. So having said that, in the last 3 weeks, we had several rain days that kept us from completing the roof. However, their manpower has increased dramatically. Yesterday, it was up to 40 people. Today, it was at 46 people. And frankly, I couldn't find or think or demonstrate too many places where they should be working, where they're not. So at the end of the day, we're going to go through the soils that were unsuitable, but also ended up being contaminated that cost the project beyond the contingency that was set aside. But beyond that, there are no excuses for the contractor not to complete this project in the next few months. With that, I'd like to turn over to Sean and just give you a couple slides for us to review for cost.
Hey, Sean.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. So if I could just pull up the slides. As Ted mentioned, we have 3 slides here tonight to share with everybody. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
So what we wanted to do was break down how the additional costs, the additional hard costs for this project are being spent to show where the challenges were. And this first slide right here shows the total change orders, including change order number 12, which is on the agenda for approval tonight, shows the total dollars that would be expended with approval of that change order and how they were spent. And on this particular slide, we've broken them down to change orders by unsuitable and contaminated soils, and then the balance of your change orders, which are non-soils change orders. And you can see right here, if you take a look at the first row, where my cursor is, unsuitable contaminated soils, we've been proposed a total of $1.6 million in soils change orders, and to date, we've approved $1.2 million in change orders. So these are the soils that we've talked about in the past council meetings where they were either unsuitable, meaning they were not able to be used for structural fill, where we encountered the hydrocarbons, where we encountered asbestos, where we encountered the second round of asbestos, things of that nature. Those are all of those costs right there for those unforeseen conditions. And we'll talk about the percentages in a moment. The second column, or the second row rather, are all your non-soils change orders. We received proposals to the tune of just about $600,000, and we've negotiated them down to just over $400,000. So almost a 33% reduction in the proposed cost. And overall, they are 25% of the additional cost to the additional hard cost to this project. Moving over to the far right here, we can see the actual percentages on the 26,828,574. That's Epic, the redeveloper's original GMP, guaranteed maximum price, to build this project out. Does anybody have any questions on this particular slide? No, okay.
Go to the next slide.
All right, so moving along. Let me see if I can reduce the size here. Hold on. That better? Okay.
Any chance you could zoom in zoom
Yeah,
in
A little bit bigger, if you could.
Oh, a little bit bigger. Okay.
A little bit.
The nearsighted folks here are nearsighted.
I just don't want to make it off the screen. How's that?
That's
Perfect.
Is that better? Okay. So we're taking this from a different angle as far as the breakdown of change orders. As you can see at the very bottom here, $1,657,000. That's the exact same total that we had on the previous page when we broke it out by soils and non-soils. On this chart here, we're breaking it down by reason category. And what we typically have on any project are scope changes, design omissions, field or unforeseen conditions, changes that are owner request. And then we have this sort of miscellaneous category, building department, utilities, and others. Sometimes the authority holding jurisdictions, which is your building department or your local utilities for power, gas, they may have certain requirements that they want you to add to the project, even though the designers have already met the code and have met what they're required to meet when they put forth that design. So that's what that category is. And as you can see here, what really stands out is row number 3, your field or unforeseen conditions. So there's been a total of $1.4 million in change orders. We just talked about 1.2 on the previous slide for being soils. That additional about $135,000 was the under slab drainage system that we talked about some months ago when Eric and I came to one of the council meetings. So overall, the percentage of the total cost of change orders for unforeseen conditions on this project is 85%. And you can see how most of the other change orders right here are very minuscule in comparison. Okay. Moving along to the third slide.
Maybe needs to be unmuted.
Somebody had a question?
I think.
Yeah, stay on this slide, Sean.
Okay.
Questions?
So one of our councilmen has a question, but he's muted.
Oh, okay.
And Liza needs to unmute him.
It happened to me earlier, so. All part of the joys of video conferencing.
I don't see her. All right. Let me try to reach out to her another way.
That's smoke signals.
You can ask it in the chat, though. He can type it in until he gets unmuted.
That's true.
So while we're waiting for Manny to unmute, so this, it says at the heading here, it says this takes us through CO number 12, which is what's on the table for tonight, right? So
that's correct, Alvaro. Yeah, we wanted to incorporate that so you can see what the true cost or how the breakout would be if that's approved.
Okay, just want to be sure that's in there.
Councilman, I may just say, what's not in here in terms of where we're going? Because of the unsuitable soil that we had to remove, we have import that we have to buy in the future. That's what's not here.
Right.
And we still have some contaminated soil that needs to be removed.
Is that contaminated soil or is it just wet soil that can't be reused as backfill?
What we did was the soil borings and the environmental study showed the potential for unsuitable soil, but not any contamination, and both occurred on the job.
Okay.
Yeah, and the pile that we do have left is Alvaro, that is unsuitable right now. Well, you know, it's right now. It has to be tested.
So, and that's currently sitting over by DPW, right? On the
yes,
sir.
Behind us. Okay.
Yep, and it's out of Epic's way.
Yeah.
And it's secured, so anything isn't spreading or anything like that. It's has hay bales, it has plastic underneath. Everything's done according to best practices.
Okay.
Can we go to the third slide? Any other questions?
This looks pretty thorough and understandable to me.
Okay.
Did Manny get unmuted?
I don't know.
I'm here. Yeah.
I called Liza. So.
Okay, we can always go back to it if you would like to.
That's good.
Okay, Manny.
Third slide.
All right. So moving along to the third slide. So this slide is what we're calling the change order cost summary. We have 3 different PCO type submissions. Now, PCOs are potential change orders that the contractor will submit to us where they're seeking additional funds to perform work that they believe to be outside of their scope. So to date, up to this slide, we've talked about all the change orders that were approved. We're going to add an element to this here. Let's just first take you through the first row. These are PCOs submitted as valid change orders to the contract. And what we mean by that is we recognize it as something that's outside of the contractor's scope of work, in this case, the redeveloper. We recognize that it's outside of their scope of work. And you can see the total here that they've submitted, $2.2 million to date. Just jumping back to the original slide, that lines up with the $2.2 million that we have right there. So what we're saying is that in this category, nothing was outside of their scope of work, okay? So they submitted $2.2 million in potential change orders. If change order number 12 was approved tonight, the total approved in the change orders would equal $1,657,000, which means we will have negotiated a cost reduction of just over $600,000 on what was submitted. Moving along to the second row, these are PCOs submitted as change orders and outright rejected. And the reason we outright reject these is because they are not valid change orders, meaning that they are owed by the redeveloper under their scope. So we get the PCO, we vet them, we check the construction documents, the specifications, the drawings, we make a determination, and we send those back to the redeveloper and we reject them. So they have, Epic to date has submitted just under $500,000 in change orders that were not valid. And of course, none of them were approved. So a cost reduction of $446,000. The final row are PCOs that are submitted as change orders and approved as contingency draws. I know we've spoken about contingency a little bit in past meetings. This is a project that is being performed by the redeveloper as a GMP, which is a guaranteed maximum price, meaning that the contractor has to perform all the scope in their contract for the price that is guaranteed unless there are any changes outside of their scope. What contractors or redevelopers in this case carry as part of their number is their own contingency. And in this case, Epic carried a contingency of $476,600. And what this is, it's basically a safety net or a risk mitigator for the builder in case they missed anything in the construction documents when they were bidding the project out. So they submitted $322,000 in PCOs seeking to have these approved as change orders or additions to their contract. And again, much like the change orders that were vetted and rejected, in this case, we said, okay, they're not valid as change orders or an add to the $26 million contract, but they can be covered by the contingency that you're carrying in the project. And so Epic draws down from, I'm sorry?
In their contract.
In their contract. So the reason we're showing this here, though, is we want everybody to understand that $322,000 for a total of just over $3 million now, $322,000 were submitted as change orders, 0 are approved. So there's a cost reduction of that exact total. So to date, Epic has submitted just over $3 million in potential change orders. If change order number 12 is approved tonight, that will be $1.6 million approved with a cost reduction of $1.3 million, just under 1.4.
Sean, can I assume that these are not contentious, so that we're as Epic agreed to all these determinations on the PCOs?
All of these are resolved, Councilman. So there are still a couple of open change orders. They're minor. They pale in comparison to this, but these are considered to be closed and resolved.
Sean, can you just, since we have you here, a change order 12 quickly?
Well, before we do that, let me just, one other thing, like the 322,447, that's not really a cost reduction because that cost is being absorbed in the $28 million, $27 million Epic budget. It's just coming out of their contingency.
Yes, but it's,
excuse me, Sean, technically not, Gene, because you have assured savings if they're under budget at the end of the project. So if the money was left over and they didn't use it, you would benefit from that.
Would split it. 70.
Right, and what we're pointing out here is that they were not seeking to take it out of their contingency. They were seeking to have it added to the $26 million.
Right, but it's right now but it's not like it didn't get spent. It's spent as part of the overall epic
Yes.
bill. It didn't
Yes.
just disappear.
That's correct.
It's their money to use to
Right.
protect the relationship.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And to that point, that's why we don't call this column over here savings, because it's a reduction from what they were seeking.
Correct.
Right.
I'm sorry, Mayor, did you have a question? I think.
No, you referred to change order 12 a number of times, so I was just hoping you could quickly go through it since it is on the agenda this evening.
Okay, so change order number 12 up for approval tonight consists of 8 different PCOs. One of them is a small credit, which we actually eliminated some parging on the top of the foundation wall footings that were not necessary. That was for $2,000. Elevator electrical changes. So these were some power changes for the elevator at $10,500.
Sean, if I could jump in there, I'd like to point out that was the one that we agreed with Epic to split. That one was actually $20,000, and we negotiated with them and got them to take half of it out of their contingency.
Yes, thank you, Eric. Eric, Eric, do you want to go through some of these, or?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, Eric's a little bit more in tune with it.
Yeah.
Take the slides back off so everybody.
Yes, as Sean mentioned, the elevator electrical, that was due to the elevator car having to be changed due to the size of the shaft, given the layout there. It was slightly smaller, but the elevator chosen did have some different electrical requirements. The next one, Bulletin 19, that is the largest one on this list for $89,000. That consists primarily of electrical changes based on the antennas for the police department that have to be placed on the roof for their communications. Why this wasn't originally part of the bid is because a couple of reasons there. The scope wasn't fully, the bids went on 80% documents there, so this scope wasn't fully fleshed out at the time. And also, with the changes in dispatch and all that, the antenna requirements for the police to communicate with the county in Westfield changed a great deal. So this is primarily conduit and other backbone going inside the building for that. And, it is a significant number, but this is items I'd like to point out that, when we did our budget recommendation, we did carry a good number for the police antennas, knowing that this would be an add-on later. So in effect, this is captured elsewhere in the budget there. I believe this also includes some plumbing charges related to having some plumbing installed for the pantry area that is going to be available to the seniors there. And the plan is to have the township's own forces install the sink and countertop after the building's handed over, but obviously the plumbing in the walls has to be done beforehand. The next one, bulletin number 20 for $37,000. That is audiovisual changes. Again, because the bid was done on 80% documents and the entire scope of the AV package for the building was not fully fleshed out at the time of bid there. These were some items that, had to be captured and negotiated and designed later. So again, we did put in there a very healthy IT, AV communications budget. So in effect, again, in other parts of the total project budget, this is captured. The site retaining wall, PCO 86 is from bulletin number 2 for $23,000. That is on the east side of the building over in the back near where the Detective Bureau currently is, behind that, the generator. This retaining wall is necessary because the building was lowered 1.5 feet during the design process after the bidding. Number 87 is a small charge, a little less than $1,800. That was a decision made by the owner with the police department to switch the keys to patented keys, so they have very restricted blanks and can't be copied as easily. Number 90, imported stone for approximately $39,000. This gets back to what Ted and Sean were referring to earlier regarding the imported fill that needs to be brought in to replace all of the unsuitable and contaminated soils that had to be exported from the site. The project was designed as, you know, even fill, that all the soils that they took out of the ground they would be putting back in, but because a good portion of it was unsuitable or contaminated, that needs to be replaced by imported fill. So we have been authorizing the contractor in portions at a time there. We haven't given them, you know, the entire number that they feel is necessary up front. We're managing the process a lot more tightly, and this is the amount that was approved for their initial import. Next one, number 91, the detention basin unsuitable soil handling for $44,000. This again, when the contractor was excavating the detention basin, Melik Tully, the geotechnical engineer for the project, was on site every day while they were doing that, assessing the soils, testing moisture contents, testing compactability, and this was the amount that had to be stockpiled in DPW, where it currently is, as we mentioned earlier, because these soils are not suitable for structural fill due to their high moisture content. And the last one is bulletin 23, the water riser changers for approximately $20,000. This relates to requirements from New Jersey American Water. Once they got involved and we began speaking with them about getting water connections both for the new municipal building and the salt dome, they came back with some requirements which the civil design engineer was unaware, and they wanted to have 2 hot boxes originally placed over by Berkeley Avenue. Those would have been very costly. So we entered into several months of discussions with them and with the engineer, and came to a solution where the water feed will go into the building, the new municipal building, and then, you know, come back out and feed the salt dome for there. So everything is kind of on one main extension that was installed. However, that does require certain changes to the water piping in the building for that split there to feed the salt dome. So this was an add to the redeveloper's contract, but it still would be significantly less than building 2 hot boxes would have been.
Correct.
And just one other note that I wanted to add to that, the total of this change order is up for approval tonight at $262,000. The PCOs that were submitted at a total cost of $336,000. So this kind of goes in line with the slides that we showed you before. So we were able to negotiate these down to just under $75,000.
Okay, so what does that bring us?
I'm sorry.
You need additional source and use of funds to complete the project.
Right.
In anticipation of removal of the contaminated soil and the additional import that needs to be brought on the project. And the contractor is requesting a delay of somewhere between 8 or 9 months. We believe it's worth 2.5 to 3 months. Technically, they were supposed to be done as of May.
With the entire project.
Correct.
It was supposed to be done in May with the entire project, but as Ted said, that they're seeking up to months of delay. They're showing a project completion right now of December 29th. We're awaiting their schedule update, which if we go back to what Ted talked about earlier in the meeting, was that there was a principals meeting some 3 weeks ago where they said that they need to clean up some change orders, get these things resolved, and they'll be able to give us a schedule update as to when they were going to complete the building.
A completion schedule.
Yeah.
How much money in total do we need to complete the project? How much more money?
Matt? Is Matt with us?
Yeah.
That's with us.
So
He's on mute, I think.
Where'd he
He's
go?
on mute. He's
Yeah.
speaking, but he's muted.
Yeah, Matt's on mute. We want to hear you, Matt.
All right. Hold on. I'm unmuting. Okay, there you go.
Liza has to unmute me. I'm not allowed. I'm not trusted with the mute button by myself, I guess. I need like
None of us are.
supervision here from others. I'm sorry, Councilman. Your question was about the Ted's follow-up on the budget situation.
Yeah, so we saw about $1.6 million that the cost has gone up by as a result of unforeseen circumstances. But we talked about dirt that needs to be removed, dirt that needs to be brought in. That's additional cost, right? So how much is it going to cost us to, how much more money do we have to spend?
I think the latest schedule just to hit the actual costs themselves are a little north of $2 million.
Yeah, that would be correct. As Ted was talking about, and you just mentioned, Alvaro, bringing in that fill. So to this point today, we've been able to offset this $1.6 million in change orders with the initial shared savings with the project buyouts and the original project contingencies, but we're nearing the end of that well, so to speak. And we know that we have so we have unfunded soils that have to be imported. We also have the potential exposure for the remainder of the site work that needs to happen out there. The big digs are over as far as for the building. The structure is there. The detention basin has been dug, but there is some site work that still has to happen. And, that with Epic's seeking 8 months of delay has also increased some of the administrative costs for the project. And all those elements together is, as Matt says, puts us over $2 million.
Does that include phase 2?
That would include phase 2.
So I just want to point out to make it clear, every time the developer delays the schedule, we still have to pay you guys. We still have to pay the architect. We still have to pay our attorney. Even though we are going to negotiate what we think the days are that they're truly entitled to, or we don't agree on them, that puts us in a really tough position as a township because we still have to carry those costs. And I just want to make that point very clear. That the longer this project goes on, with Epic delaying the schedule, if there's continued delays, we still have to carry the cost of the professionals that are managing this project. In addition to the $2 million that you're talking about, Matt.
That's correct, Mayor. Yep.
Do we have a number on that?
So Mayor, I would just add that, that $2 million number is basically the known cost today, right? So you have, to your point, depending on how much longer the project takes, and we can comment on that in a second, you've got, additional carrying costs. You also have, Sean just said, December 29th. So you have 7+ months of project left where, you can't walk into that project without any additional contingency cost, right? So you have to anticipate, as you have been in the past, that there may be additional undiscoverable items that are going to pop up. You would like to think that that number won't get too big when you have what Ted described earlier. We're 3 weeks away from being a weather tight building, right? So presumably that's when some of the surprises start to go away. But you obviously are not going to walk into any project when you're setting a remaining cost number without a contingency on top of that. And then, as Ted and Sean have said, and as you just mentioned, look, there are going to be liquidated damages, right, that the township is entitled to under the contract. As Ted mentioned earlier, 8 to 9 months is what the contractor is looking for as an extension. We think it's far less than that. And the difference between those two is liquidated damages, money to the township contractually under the redevelopment agreement. So all of those things have to go into that end of the day analysis to say, what is the amount we really want to say we need in order to comfortably try and get this project done. To your point about timing, as Ted mentioned earlier, the project was supposed to be done May 1st. Phase 1, which is the actual municipal building proper, was supposed to be completed earlier than that. We have sent Epic a letter basically informing them that they did not formally seek a contract time extension. And so as a result, at the moment, their deadline is May 1st. And every day that they miss is an unexcused delay. As Ted said, we recognize there will be some excused delays for sure, things that were not Epic's fault. But at the end of the day, that clock is now running. We've put them on notice of that, and that negotiation process has begun and is underway.
I also want to point out what they're projecting as part of phase 2 being completed December 29th is sort of the worst time to potentially be paving and doing the sorts of things that they're talking about. It's almost inherent to another delay. So I just want to point that out as well. So Ted, walk us through the timing. You know, I guess we've sort of been grappling with, there's two, it really boils down to two choices. Bond for more money or potentially halt phase 2.
Correct. So you have a schedule value of, correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, $1,930,000, right?
Correct.
Right. And that would cover us through project completion with Epic, exclusive of any claim negotiations that occur. And we recommended that you take a credit against phase 2 to avoid being in the winter program of completing phase 2 and get him to finish the building and stabilize your existing building for a few months until we finish your new building.
So if we
So it's a removal of scope from his contract.
So if we put the project on pause, let's call it, right?
You mean phase 2?
Phase 2, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Put phase 2 on a pause. Could there be additional money left over in phase 1 because the contingency wasn't as great or the need wasn't as great, some of those things? I mean, is there a possibility that if we sort of take a halt or take a breath here, there may be money that we could apply towards phase 2? I mean, is that realistic or just completely unrealistic at this
I don't believe it's realistic because it's going to be a negotiation of the value of the 1.93 million, because they're going to suggest that lost profit and some of their general conditions for that period should be removed.
And
so that number 19 will probably be less.
Right, and out of that, there is also things that we have to get a list of materials that they've already procured and we'll turn over to the township. So that's a benefit to the township because the township won't have to reprocure those materials, but that'll reduce that number as well. And we're planning to get together with Epic to sit down and explore that. We also have to finalize where the cut points are between phase 1 and phase 2. It may not be as clean as shown on the drawings, things of that nature. So
Correct.
we do expect that cost will go down some, the credit that is.
Do we have a cost analysis if we do that? Because I just heard Ted mention holding on to the old building temporarily.
I believe mothballing the building is not a substantial cost. It's not. You're not talking about years. You're talking about months.
It's still part of the project that has to be done. We have to factor in the fact that now we're going to need new GC. We still have to send it out for bid again. And even if we have the building closed up, whether you winterize it and turn the heat off and let the thing fall apart to knock down, or keep the heat on and try to maintain some kind of building, there's still a cost involved.
Well, the amount of temperature control that you have is minimal compared to occupied space.
We have a property that we've been having someone else pay the heat. Luckily, that was not the reason. Was one of the reasons they sold the building because it was too expensive. I don't want to get stuck paying.
But that's not slated for demolition.
The other one is
slated for reoccupation. So
the other one
you have
was
to
slated
keep
for
it in a
demolition.
condition that you can reoccupy it. That's not the case here.
So we have no projections, no numbers, nothing else.
No, that's not the case, Manny. So we've analyzed the $32 million budget, and we've restructured it, and we've taken into account the amount of import fill that needs to come in. We've taken into account, as we get closer to the finish line with the building, there are less unknowns that pop up. I mean, the detention basin's done. We're out of the ground. At this point, they're going to be moving into an interiors program to finish the building. So the likelihood of any major change orders coming up are smaller now than they ever were. But we're still carrying a contingency of $500,000 in that $32 million budget just to complete the building. There's also another contingency of $594. Yes.
Just a second. Councilman, are you asking about the analysis of the reduction of phase 2 or the whole
Phase two,
project?
but that was a follow-up question, was going to be the contingency.
Right, so-
$500,000
Okay.
contingency on
So,
phase
so
one.
phase
19.
2, phase 2, the negotiations are going to cover around overhead and profit markups by the contractor, and supplies and materials that are already purchased that we'll get back. Okay, and we'll when we notify him in writing and he gets his subs to respond, we'll be able to evaluate that. Okay, and then the second part is the whole project budget. Basically, the whole project budget is a reflection of the unknown existing conditions of the soil. That's the difference. Because we couldn't evaluate what that could be at the beginning of the project, we did suggest a number, but it didn't make sense to carry that because it was an unknown that potentially might not occur.
And we are carrying in the restructured budget, if the township decides to halt the project after phase 1, of just under $600,000 to offset any reduction in the credit for any of these materials that need to be turned over, the overhead and profit that Ted alludes to. The benefit of having the GMP on the project right now more than ever is the fact that it's an open book project delivery system. So we know what their buyouts are for all of their contractors. They had to provide us with an entire breakdown of their scopes of work. So we know how that $1.9 million adds up. We know what portion are general conditions. So it's not going to be where they just come back and say, well, we're only going to offer $1.1 million. We know what the costs were. So it's a matter of getting to the bottom of, well, what portions of those scopes overlap with phase 1, and what portions are they really entitled to for the lost profit or overhead and profit, and getting the best fair value of the township. And the way it'll work is, let's say it's agreed upon that it's $1.6 million. Well, the contingency that we're carrying in the restructured budget will be reduced by $300,000. And that's a sizable contingency that we're carrying in there right now, knowing that we still have that negotiation ahead of us.
How do we hold them accountable for finishing up in September, considering that they've been delaying this project for so long?
Well, as Ted alluded to earlier, they have care, custody, control. They are the builder. They are the ones who determine means and methods. Okay, we're the eyes and ears for the owner. We document the project. It's not something that we want to do is document the so to speak failure of the project, but that's what we've done. We put them on notice when the manpower is short. We put them on notice when they're not performing. We've asked for recovery schedules. They've been unresponsive. Frankly, they've been unresponsive to the legal team on this project as well. That's.
But having said that, just remember, you're out of the ground. You're close to core and shell, weather tight. They're going to self-perform a lot of the interiors work. They're a capable firm. Don't know why they haven't cooperated here, but there's no reason, none that we're going to cause for them not to complete in the next 4 months, if you take phase 2 away. So your opportunity or choice is additional funding for the project through a bond ordinance, or however you do that as a source and use of funds, or we suggested to take phase 2 out to give you breathing room and to get Epic to finish the project.
I would just add to that, again, going back to those liquidated damages, at the moment, again, because they have not submitted for a contract time extension, every day that they're late is a day that, they're paying us, right, as liquidated damages under the contract. So you're 3 weeks away from a weather-tight building. Weather no longer becomes an excuse. Something in the ground no longer becomes an excuse. You're out of the ground. You're sealed up. You're basically complete.
Orders are no longer an excuse.
What's that, Ted?
Change orders are no longer an excuse.
Change orders are no longer a reason to hold it up. So the decks are cleared. And I think, as Ted mentioned earlier, in response to a principals meeting, you've seen over the last couple of days a level of manpower on the job that Eric, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that you generally have not seen, prior. So,
the example I'll give you is there's 2 masonry crews. We never had that before. They wouldn't work out of sequence. Now they are.
So if I understand what you're saying correctly, Ted, Sean, is that they're rapidly running out of situations in which unexpected delays on phase one could occur.
Correct.
Correct.
Excuse, yes.
Therefore, the likeliest guarantee that we have that the schedule of within, talking about September, is likely to be followed.
I would say October to October 15th, but yes.
Okay.
And I want to add that I think that the phase two timing in December is, I mean, obviously not going to be good either. So that would worry me as well. I think that asking for more money at this point is not a great option, in my opinion.
And I think we're at a point that it's either, I mean, a bond ordinance would be imminent. It's not, let's wait a month and see how they perform. If we're at a point that we either need the money for phase two now, by the next council meeting, we probably have to introduce a bond ordinance. I don't think I'm overstating it. Or we have to make a decision.
Ted, I have a quick question. Being that I'm a new council member here and I just got sworn in this year, how did we get to this point? I mean, what were the actual, the real issues with them?
With the performance of the contractor?
Yes.
You mean what? Go ahead, Sean.
So as we all know, we've encountered
talk about excusable delays.
Yeah, excusable delays. So as we were talking about earlier, we think they're at roughly at about 2.5 months worth of excusable delays. Those are things that are outside of the control.
Right, the underground plumbing.
Yep. So there are really where Eric and I have been documenting the job and where we really saw it veer off course was late last spring, early summer, where the underground plumbing work was just not started. We had a history of knockdown, drag them out fights or arguments back and forth with the contractor at that point in time. So there was a significant amount of slippage. If everybody recalls, the steel was supposed to be going in last April, and it wasn't erected until September. From that point forward in September, they lost another several months. So from September on, after the steel was up, it really came down for manpower levels, performance of getting the building enclosed, the masonry work. Looking back at things now, we think the durations in their original baseline schedule were probably inaccurate. Work was performed out of sequence. Work was not performed on days when the weather was suitable to perform work. Epic has told us that they believe that the winter conditions have contributed to the slippage in the schedule. That goes back to our argument from last summer where they did.
Winter?
I'm sorry?
I said the good winter, they couldn't
Yeah,
work.
the
Winters
mild
out
winter.
there.
Had in years, yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah.
So it really is what was, even after all of the unsuitable soils that we encountered on the project, we were still only a couple of months behind. And so the real slippage, which we've documented, is in the failure to perform the underground plumbing last year, which means you couldn't have your slab put in, which means you couldn't have the steel put up. That was a big component. We've been on the record about it.
And adequate manpower.
Adequate manpower.
For all their subcontracting trades. They never properly manpowered the job when they had the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. And the argument
doesn't make them do it.
Part of our argument, aside from having a very mild winter and many days where work should have occurred where it didn't, was that the fact that none of that masonry work would have been taking place in the late fall and throughout the winter months had the underground plumbing been taken care of late last spring and during the summer, because the steel would have been up by June or July, and they would have been able to move forward from there. So that's how we got to here.
And who was managing the project at the time when the underground plumbing was going on?
That's Epic. Epic is the one who has care, custody, control. They dictate manpower. They dictate means and methods. They are the builder. They are in sole control of that.
Yeah, but who's managing Epic on our side?
We're managing Epic.
Okay.
But we don't control them.
Yeah. No, I know. Yeah.
We're managing the project.
So, Councilman, on occasion we had your council write them letters with no effect. And Matt could opine on that. You got to look.
Speak to the legal to whatever degree you can without being in executive session. Do you want to sort of speak to the legal history if you can?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, the primary issue here is, they had, we basically gave them control of the building, and we gave them certain dates within which, and not too many, because you don't micromanage these projects. We gave them certain dates by which certain things had to be completed. So the salt dome had to be completed by a certain date. The building proper needs to be completed by a certain date. The entirety of the project as a whole needs to be completed by a certain date. And largely, until you get to that point where they've missed that date, they get to run their schedule and figure out what's going on. As Sean and Ted have said, there had been numerous instances throughout the project where you could see that there were going to be problems. And so we've had meetings with them where, we've gotten everybody in a room, lawyers included, to walk through potential remedies to outstanding issues. We have written, letters identifying that they're, getting ready to default on the timetable side. Until really the last handful of days, they have responded, but the response has not, as Ted and Sean said, has not really produced results. In the last couple of days, it has. But that said, it's not over either, because as you've heard a couple times tonight, the amount of days that are excused legally versus the amount of days that are not excused legally, and the difference in those number of days and what that means from a contract damages perspective, that's all still on the table. That will all still need to be resolved as we move towards closure on the project, whatever that closure milestone is, whether it's completion of phase 1 and a removal of phase 2, or ultimately a completion of phase 2 now or down the road.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we have to make a decision. I mean, from my perspective, I'll start. I don't know. I mean, to be in this position is untenable. Nobody wants to be here. Nobody wants to make the decision as to whether or not we have to halt phase 2 or go out for more money in a global pandemic when we have no idea what our tax collection rate is going to be. We're hopeful what it's going to be in the third quarter. There are people that are certainly hurting. You don't want to put that burden on them any more than we have to. My preferred, way of things working out would to have this building done, both phases done, the building, old town hall demolished, a brand new parking lot for our commuters with additional spaces. But that just doesn't seem to be where we're at for a litany of reasons, largely because of the delay in the schedule. And so for that reason, I would be in support of halting phase 2, putting it on pause, taking a breath, and seeing if we could get it done at a later date.
Can I just clarify
Question, do we know, or when will we know what our recovery for liquidated damages would be?
Well, you won't know that for sure until you know when they're actually done with the building.
Yep.
It keeps on adding up, right? Every day that they miss.
Correct.
Can I just clarify something for the public? Because I think somebody alluded to it, but I'm not sure if you came out and said it. When we say phase 2 for public, we are talking about demo of our existing buildings, which is the town hall, detective bureau, and engineering department, paving and repaving and making it all nice, like the existing parking lot. And after those buildings are demoed, that will become more parking lot. And then there's things like sign installation and things like that. So that is phase 2. We're not at all talking about not completing the existing building that's being constructed. We're talking about the more aesthetically pleasing portions of this project, just so everybody's clear on that. So if phase 2 was suspended until a later date, when this new building is open, that would also create, I believe, 119 parking spots. And then the old buildings would stay put until we figure out when to demo and pave them. So I just want to make sure everybody's clear on what that is, what we're talking.
We won't have a cost breakdown analysis until we make a decision going forward.
That's correct.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
we won't have a cost breakdown or analysis until we make a decision going forward. So we're making a decision without having full information, just assumptions.
Well, I don't think it's an assumption. I think there are facts that speak for the facts is there have been considerable delays. The facts is
Well,
that
but we also have $500,000 in contingency on one project, and I think it was $590,000 of contingency in the other project. So I'm just trying to figure out if those contingency dollars will be used, or if we're jumping the gun too soon, and we could have used those contingency dollars to finish the project. I'm just trying to get numbers.
We're not saying we're not going to finish the project. The project will get done, and just a pause during this time of uncertainty.
And let me also say that the fact is that we have our experts, we have our engineers, and we have our consultants. We rely on them and their judgment to help in the areas where we don't have 100% certain knowledge of what the future is going to be like. Our experts have been unanimous tonight in offering their views on the situation and what they believe the most prudent response is to handle it. We don't normally get in situations like these a crystal ball to determine the future. We have to make the best judgment based on the facts as we know them. And so my view of the matter is in full agreement with the mayor. This is not something, I will not go to the taxpayers of this town after all the things that happened and say, we need additional funding for you on this to get this done. If there is an alternative, and our experts have provided that alternative, that I think is fair to the residents of this town, then that is what I will support.
So in other words, what you just said is that
try and delay.
We stop the project.
Wait, one at a time. Stephen, finish your thought and then we'll go to Manny.
I think as the mayor's pointed out, we don't have much time for delay on this either. So if we are asking roughly for where we stand as of tonight, my view is 100% firmly on where I am. And I don't see any basis that I would change my mind on it based on what we've been talking about.
Okay, Manny.
So I'm in agreement with you. I don't have no reason. I don't want to go back to the residents and say it's going to cost more. But without having full financials, which we still don't have, and a full understanding of what the cost is, and from what was said earlier, we might have to go back and ask for more. And I'm trying to avoid that. I'm trying to find an alternative system from our experts and try to figure something out. Because right now, as it stands, whether we stop the project now and look for the savings and hope to save money later on, or we complete the project, right now we're still going to be short. And this came right from the experts right now, unless we use the contingency monies and work that out also. So I'm trusting full into our experts, but I'm trying to get better at analytics. That's it.
I think that Angie asked the question earlier, can we finish this project with the money that we have? And the answer that Ted said is that we can't.
Well, Stephen was worried about not raising funds, but we just heard from the experts we have to raise the funds.
But I'm going to say, let's be clear.
Yeah.
We are going to have to go out for additional money at some point. I think what needs to be clearer is what's going to be left over potentially in phase one, though Ted is saying.
That's all I'm asking.
Not much.
Yeah,
my point is the timing right now with the pandemic, with a skinned down municipal budget, with a tax collection rate that's unknown for Q2 and Q3, with the fact that we have to pay the county and Board of Ed taxes, I think, on Friday. You know, there's a lot of things that are just financial unknowns at this point. And to introduce a bond ordinance next week, because that's the latest, am I getting that right? That's the latest that we would need to do something like that, Matt, in order to continue on?
Yeah, Mayor, the challenge is, the bond ordinance is 2 meetings plus a publication plus 20 days. So your ability to provide those funds is always approximately 45 days away from the day you make that decision. And, with only 7 months left for the entirety of the project, and if it's, phase one, even lesser than that is a lot of time in the construction world in terms of how much money we've got left versus how much we have to spend going forward. So yes, it's the next meeting at the absolute latest.
I would like to be able to sit down with Mast and go one more time, scrub through these contingency numbers, and also look at the project and see if there's any way we could cut the spend to keep phase two in the project and push some dollars out later before we make a firm decision.
I'm just confused on this one. I mean, how are we not holding them accountable? I mean, that's, you know, in relation to my previous questions. It's like, you know, how can they delay the project this much and not be accountable for any of it?
So, Councilman, I'll be the first one, and then maybe Mass can chime in if they want. It's not that we're not holding them accountable. You sort of have to think of this in two ways. One is the amount of money that they will ultimately owe us in liquidated damages.
Okay.
But two is the amount of money that it's going to take to complete the project regardless of that, right?
Okay.
By virtue of all of the dollar increases that Sean took you through earlier in those
Yes.
slides,
Yes. Mhm.
right? Those items are largely what is causing the increase here that is causing the conversation about the budget. The dollar amounts about what we owe Epic, about what Epic owes us, about how that nets out between the 2-month delay versus the 9-month delay, the liquidated damages, et cetera. That's not in this budget. That's a separate analysis that's going to go on. But that accountability and their liquidated damages charge that they'll have to pay to us, that's a separate issue that's still being pursued and will be enforced. But
Okay.
we're saying, forget that for a moment. You still have an issue in terms of the actual budget for the project
Right.
itself.
But if I'm right, Matt, though, if in fact they end up owing us more than we owe them, that would take the net cost of the project down.
It is, but you're never going to get,
No,
that's
we're
not
not
going to be the amount of money that's going to help you in terms of phase 2.
Right, and that's basically where I perceived that this situation is. And so ultimately it comes back to the basic question that the mayor posited to us, which is, are we going to go out for a bond for a couple, you know, whatever, a couple million or whatever we're talking about, or are we going to focus on the phase 1 aspect of it, get this done with the funds that are there, and then when we turn to phase 2, whatever cost is associated with that, we cross the bridge when we get to it. But right now, I think we have to focus on the question of finishing phase 1 and on the advice of our consultants.
Is there a way we can enforce the
Let Susan go. Susan's like,
I guess I just have to jump in, so I'm going to jump in. So I agree with the mayor. I have to say, in this, you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. People are struggling. They're not working. To go out there and ask for money now, I kind of akin it to like you're doing an addition on your house. You want to do all these pieces. You kind of, one of you loses your job. You got to scale back a little bit, but you're going to get there in the future. You know you want to do it. You know you have to do it, and you're going to get there. You know, it seems to me like it's economics 101 right now.
Right.
And we have these experts that are telling us this is our option. This is our option.
Matt, is there any way we can enforce the liquidated damages right now as opposed to waiting?
Practically speaking, no.
No. Okay.
Can I just jump in and say something? Sorry.
Sean and then Alvaro.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Hard to
So, just to kind of, Gentiana, just to kind of chime in on your question there. You know, part of the reason we're here is because Epic truly believes that they're not responsible for any of these delays. So that's the component you have to consider too.
Okay.
We've documented what we've documented. We're going to make our case for the 2.5 months that we think that they're excusable delays. Based on the letter that Matt issued to Epic, they're charged with preparing their defense of why they're 8 months behind.
Okay.
And the other thing, just to answer some of the questions that were going around before, and I know there's additional administrative and consultant fees here, but that's to the tune of about additional $400,000 on the overall project. That is not why we are out of funding for this project right now. We are out of funding for this project right now because the township has already paid $1.3 million in unsuitable and contaminated soils, and the township must still pay up to another $500,000 to import material to replace that. So that's almost anywhere between 1.7 and $1.8 million, which is very close to the $2 million that we're talking about, which would be needed to complete phase 2 if the project were to continue from this day forward.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate this.
What was the
My
original
question was-
contingency allotted for this project? Because I think that's a very important starting point. That
For the adopted budget, the contingency was $753,000.
And what did we recommend, Sean?
Well, our original budgets back in 2017, we started at about $3 million in contingency.
So, and soil alone blew through that contingency,
Yes.
aside from everything else.
Right.
My question was to Matt, which is about the, so if we stop phase or take phase 2 out of the picture, allow the EPIC to complete the building, does that help us get to the final numbers, the liquidated damages numbers, more easily than if we continue to work on phase 2?
Well, Councilman, it certainly would happen quicker, right? Because that's
Right.
when, that
Right.
process would commence.
Once.
Obviously, to the extent that the time that we are disputing with them is compressed, then obviously it makes it maybe a little bit easier, right? Are we fighting over the difference between 3 months and 9 months, or ultimately 3 months and 11 months, or something like that? But I'm not sure that the process is that much harder, but certainly the process starts, earlier.
And what is going to be our lever to get them to get phase 1 done on time when we come out with this change order potentially? I mean, they've successfully stalled for a long time. I'm just worried is what's our lever now? If we're saying that they have care, custody, control, and means and measures, and okay, so now they thought they were going to work longer, so they just stall it out until December to finish phase 1. And how do we stop that?
I think I asked the question earlier, Jean. It was just in different words. I said, how do we hold them accountable to finish the project in September as they expect?
4 months, right? Guys,
Right.
I know you guys touched upon this, but that's
Right.
Yeah, and I believe our experts explained that based on what specific things are involved in the remainder of the phase.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from Mass Stephen on how they're going to get this done by October 1st, when this comes out. They're the ones that are managing it.
I think Ted mentioned October 15th, right, Ted?
They should be able to complete by October 1st, October 15th. But Matt and I have demonstrated to you that we don't have control, short of you defaulting them to make them perform.
But can we default them without having an agreed upon schedule completion?
Well, they're going to give us a schedule based on your approval of that other change order we spoke about earlier this evening.
But that doesn't have a completion date to it.
They're right now, Councilwoman, they're working in good faith on the project, on that change order that's up for approval this evening. And
Right.
and their response to us as late as past Thursday was that get us the change order subject to your approval, and we'll give you a completion schedule. And our opinion is it's October 15th, if you take phase 2 away.
So Ted, can I just ask a question? So phase 2, deleting phase 2 from the project would just be another change order.
It's
correct?
a
Scope check.
deduct change order. It's not a termination for convenience, not a termination for cause. It's just a simple deduct change order to their contract. There's no litigation. It's process of just taking scope away, just like you would give them a scope addition.
And they would have to understand in this uncertain times, of course, we would love to finish the project, but if there's no money left to do it, there's no money left to do it right now. They
Part
have
of the conversation we had at principals meeting, and then when we met with just principals without you, was that they understand that. I basically said there's no money left in the job, and that you got to be prepared to take a scope reduction for phase 2, and they understand that. The question is, what's the value that we're going to argue over?
So I think the next step is Jean wanted to, I guess, to have another meeting. And by the next council meeting, I think we either need a change order on the agenda for the scope reduction, or we need a bond ordinance.
The
on
bond,
the agenda.
yep.
Okay, does everybody agree with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Ted and Sean, if you can just hang out a little bit longer for our citizens hearing in case there are any specific questions. And I think Matt, you just have no choice but to hang on, huh?
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you, Ted. Thank you, Sean. All
I'll
right,
be right back.
moving on to the approval of the minutes. I believe that's where we're at now.
Okay, make a motion, move that the township official reports be accepted and approved for approved minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Brahimai,
Yes.
Mr. Kudo,
Yes.
Mrs. Kingsley,
Yes.
Mr. Majeros,
Yes.
Mrs. Pogue,
Yes, sorry. Yeah,
Mr. Yelling, I think he stepped away.
Okay, we're doing what, the public hearing and final adoption of ordinance?
Yes.
Okay, it's the end. Is we read that or I read that?
I'll read it. An ordinance of the Township of Berkeley Heights, County of Union, State of New Jersey, amending Title 13 Public Services at Chapter 13.12 Sewer Service System.
Okay, move that the ordinance is read by the clerk be offered on first reading. This is the final adoption. And that is it marked with the April 28th. When's the final reading on this, Anna? Is the final reading?
Yes.
Okay, so May 12th, be set as the date for the final reading. And the clerk be directed to advertise same in the Courier News.
second.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Brahimai,
Yes.
Mr. Kudo,
Yes.
Mrs. Kingsley,
Yes.
Mr. Majeros,
Yes.
Mrs. Pogue,
Yes.
Mr. Yellen.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Where are we on this? Sorry, I had to step away for a moment.
Final adoption. Roll call.
Yes.
Number 10.
Okay, we just did 10, so now we're on 11. I hereby move to open the hearing on agenda items only and citizens hearing.
Second.
All right, roll call and then I'll read this.
Mrs. Brahimai,
Yes.
Mr. Kudo,
Yes.
Mrs. Kingsley,
Yes.
Mr. Majeros,
Yes.
Mrs. Pogue,
Yes.
Mr. Yellen.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to read the instructions as I always do. Number 1, there will be one public comment session. Before the agenda items, there will be no public comment at the end of the meeting. All participants, with the exception of council, will be on audio only and will be muted until the public comment period. People can request to address the council at any time by putting your name and address in the chat box to the right of your screen. The host, who is Liza, will see these requests and call on you during the public comment period. Each resident will get 1 3-minute period to make the remarks. Council will respond only when the resident is completely finished and back on mute. This is to ensure each person who wants to ask a question gets the chance to and will avoid people talking over each other so everyone is clearly heard. When the host, Eliza, calls on people to ask their question, they will do it directly via audio only, not video. Please indicate when your questions are complete. And with that, the citizens hearing is now open.
Okay, yes. So first question from Charlie Pratt, 45 Park Avenue. Just hold on because it takes a second to unmute. Okay, Charlie, go ahead.
How you doing? Couple quick questions. First one, let me put it out to Matt. Matt, this is about the Mondelli property. You have on there that the initial park is built by the developer and the maintenance is taken care of by the developer moving forward, even though the entity transfers over and is owned by the town. What happens if, for survivability purposes, what happens if the parcel is sold, Elite is out of the property in its entirety? What is the survivability of that agreement? Is that part of the deed? Is that just an agreement on paper between two entities? My question is, how do you ensure that the maintenance would carry forward, even in a change of ownership or a default of the provider of service?
Okay, you have more questions than that, Charlie?
Yeah, one other question.
We're going to list them all, then we'll answer them all.
The other question I have would be for Ted, Eric, and Sean, and that is simply in any postponement of phase 2, would there be some kind of an assurance that somebody can't come back later and say, well, now that it's a different time frame, now the costs, of course, have gone up because A, B, C, and D all cost more to perform. How does that protect any postponement? Do we have a protection as taxpayers and as a township that cost won't escalate in a postponement? That's it.
All right, thank you, Charlie. So Matt, you want to take number 1? Mondelli? Oh, Liza, he needs to be unmuted.
Yep.
Matt's giving me sign language.
Well,
Okay.
sorry, Charlie. Hey, Charlie, that's a great question. I appreciate you bringing that up. It's an issue that I think we would have addressed at the next meeting when the redevelopment agreement and the maintenance agreement, because there will be an actual park maintenance agreement, are considered by the council. But there will be an agreement. It'll be between the township and the current developer. That agreement will run with the land. So to your first point, if there is a transfer of ownership, if 5 years later, which is not atypical, the developer sells that project off to a real estate investment trust or some other, longer term holder, the obligation will transfer and run with future property owners, for the life of the property. To your point about default, since these are UREs, we'll tie the park maintenance obligations to the financial agreement. So basically, as long as there's a pilot in place, you'll have that extra hook. The developer or the successor does not want to lose their pilot over plowing the sidewalks, right? Sweeping the sidewalks. So we'll tie it through enforcement with the pilot, and it will run with the land to owners.
Thank you, Matt. Ted, can you take question 2 about the protection of the cost or the budget, I guess?
Yes, the contractors that will do phase 2 are site work contractors and demolition contractors, not the same subcontractors that will be completing the building. There is some crossover work with utilities, but generally it's different trades.
Okay, thank you, Ted.
Okay, next we have Mark Facher, 107 Emerson Lane. Just give me a second, Mark, I gotta find you. Okay, nothing's easy. Where'd you go? Oh, here he is, okay. Mark, are you, okay, there we go.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. First of all, thanks everyone for your service in this pandemic. I know it's a tough time. My first question relates to the municipal complex and what we just heard. I think the first question I have is how we got to this point and I don't see a lot of options. Going out for another bond isn't very appealing, especially now. But the issue is what's been happening for the past 6 months as far as compelling Epic to develop a recovery schedule, give them a notice of default, call their bond. They've posted a bond. Sureties don't like and principals don't like getting their bonds called. I mean, the problem we're going to have when we go back out and stall the project and then open up for phase 2, there's going to be a lot of duplicative costs. There's going to be a demobilization, a remobilization. You're going to have general conditions, insurance and everything that we're going to have to go out and get. And when we go back out to bid, all of these costs are going to be embedded in the new contractor's proposal. So I think, Matt, you said we did give them a notice at some point, but it sounded like we waited until May 1st or thereabouts. But 6 months ago, when we knew they couldn't hit schedule after we've had these mild winters, why weren't we pounding them with recovery schedules and the like, so that when we get here today, our back isn't up against the wall? Because all of this work would have been part of the GMP, and now it's not going to be, and we're going to be at the whim of doing new bids. It's probably public bid at that point instead of redevelopment. I know that's a compounded question, but if you could summarize that, it would be great. And then a couple other thoughts on the soil. Did we explore soil reuse? Because DEP will allow that, since it sounds like we need to bring in fill now and we have some time as a result of their delay. Can we do a soil reuse plan to help mitigate that cost? And then finally, I haven't looked at it in a while, but there's the hazardous discharge site remediation fund that DEP has that municipalities can sometimes avail themselves to. and we might be able to get an interest-free loan or even a grant up to a point. And if we could use that to defray the cost, it would help reduce, I guess, the overall cost of the project, but not sure where that program stands. I have another question on another agenda item. Should I get back in queue for that one?
Yeah, Mark, ask us all your questions and then we'll try to answer them all together.
Okay. The other one relates to Resolution 4, which is the liquor license. I think that was the last time I appeared and spoke at a council meeting. It was in person. I definitely prefer that to this. But, you know, on that resolution, it looks like it's related to the hotel, but I looked into it, got the application, and really it looks like the liquor license expansion is going towards the entire property. And while the resolution says 250 Connell, I think it is, I wrote it down, there's an addendum or attachment to that application that shows cross-hatching of virtually the entire property. It covers a Mexican restaurant, it covers green areas. So you're taking that liquor license that was earmarked for the hotel at a cost of, I think, $325,000 years ago to now being expanded to cover the entire property. And first, procedurally, I don't see how that's the case because you haven't even voted yet on the ordinance granting zoning change. So I don't see how you could adopt this resolution now in advance of that. But this is extraordinary relief, as is the zoning application, which, you know, you'll address, I guess, at the next meeting when it's on for public hearing. But they're suing us, and we don't know what the outcome of that piece of litigation will be on their tax appeal. There's traffic problems. There's going to be.
I'm sorry. Can you just? I want to make sure you get your question in because it's been over time. Can you get your question?
Yeah. So the question is, why are we doing this now, and why is it earmarked under an existing liquor license when instead we should first do the rezoning, see how that goes, get public comment on it, let them settle their tax appeals, and then grant the extraordinary relief that they're seeking in a zoning ordinance.
Okay. And any other, that's those two issues, right, Mark?
Yes.
Okay.
With questions.
Matt, do you want to, there you are. Matt, do you want to tackle the municipal complex, the recovery schedule?
Yeah, Mayor, let me start on that, and then while I'm talking, Liza can unmute Ted and Sean on the recovery schedule side. So, Mark, we have been, as you said, pounding the table over the last 6 months, probably longer. Sean and Ted will can go into that in a little more detail, in particular on the recovery schedule process, both from our end and from their end. As for default and the bonding company, I'll just say at the moment that you're reading a page ahead in the playbook. That is obviously something that is, that is squarely in our sights, right? We understand how that can be deployed. Let me just mention on the HDSRF funds, I thought we looked at that, literally maybe we, as in you and I, looked at that quite a while ago. But that's a great point. We will look at that again and just see whether there is an option there. When it comes to rebidding, the redevelopment project would not be complete. As a result, the redevelopment area designation would not go away. And as a result, the property would still be subject to the redevelopment powers. So as I know you know, the council would have broad discretion in terms of how they ultimately contracted for that additional portion of the project whenever they decided to pick that back up again. Sean and Ted, do you guys want to just provide a little more on efforts?
You're talking about phase 2, what you just said, correct, Matt?
What I just said was on phase 2, but I think Mark's point was more that what have we been doing in terms of a recovery schedule, demanding a recovery schedule, pounding the table for a recovery schedule for the last 6 months or longer on the entirety of the project.
We asked for their claim. They didn't give us one. We gave you our analysis that's protected, and they still haven't responded. So you have the right, like you said, with the bonding company, we're not there yet. With respect to the soil, yes, we can look at testing the soil, but it has to be tested to see how we can reduce it. But having said that, we reduced the price per ton for all the existing change orders by almost $200 a ton from what they projected or requested for disposal. And the phase 2, to answer your question, it's a different contractor. It's a smaller job. It's site work and demolition. So it should be less expensive than what's currently on the schedule value for this GC as part of a bigger project.
Yeah, if I could just chime in about the soils, I think part of Mark's question, and forgive me if I get it wrong, was about reusing some of the soils and I know looking at some of the grants, one of the things everybody needs to be cognizant of is that although it's a large site, it's a tight site. So when these soils come out of the ground, they take up a substantial amount of area, areas that were never intended to be taken up by soils that cannot be used or put back into the earth by the builder. And so there's a need to either dispose of it, find another home for it, or condition it where possible. And we've consulted, Eric can kind of speak to this a little bit, we've consulted all along the way with Melik Tully, who's a geotechnical engineer. We've consulted with Langen Engineering, who's the environmental consultant on the project. Simply put, there is no room on this site to shake out any of the material, to condition it, as none of the other construction activities would be able to take place. And that's really one of the biggest constraints that we have. It's finding the most economical and efficient way to manage these soils, because every day that soil is in the way of the builder is another day that goes to what the claim that they're going to be putting together and putting forth. So Eric, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
And I would like to, it certainly was something worth pursuing, looking at drying these soils in such a way. As Sean said, the site does not present a lot of area with which to spread them out sufficiently in order for them to dry. And please keep in mind that the contractor would be doing that work, and that is not work that is part of their contract. So there would be a cost, a labor cost, a daily labor cost involved with that. In addition, I just want to make sure everyone is clear that, these soils, the unsuitable soils were judged as too high moisture content and unsuitable by Melik Tully, the geotechnical engineer, and the contaminated soils, were judged as not suitable for reuse due to environmental reasons by Langen, who is the project's environmental engineer. Putting soils with hydrocarbons back in the ground, no matter how they were conditioned, Langen just said, that's a no-go. They need to be disposed of properly within state law. So, that's what we did.
Also, just for the record, because this dirt has become a unpassioned project of mine for the past couple of months. The grant we were talking about, that Mr. Facher talked about, is mostly for brownfields. Last year we started working on this, and we've been, there's 2 applications, one for hydrocarbon and one for asbestos. So despite the fact that the state has told us this is primarily for brownfields properties, we are still going to apply anyway and try to make the case for that. Our last big disposal of dirt cost roughly, I guess, guys, $500,000. I'm refusing to pay $500,000 to Epic to get rid of that stockpile number 6 that's by the DPW. We found that spot for them to get it out of their work area so they can't claim delay by that pile of dirt. And I have spent weekends traipsing around Berkeley Heights looking for a spot for this dirt. We are having talks with the county this week to figure out how we can possibly use this dirt in other locations. I've gotten quotes from local vendors to dispose of this dirt. So I've asked about burning the dirt. I have gone through every possible situation on alternatives on how to get rid of this dirt, anything besides paying Epic to get rid of it. So please know that just paying this company to get rid of unusable dirt is the bane of our existence right now. And we're doing everything possible to come up with cheaper alternatives that also will provide a community benefit. So
Thank you for that, Liza.
And I want to commend Liza
and breathe dirt right now, which is
for yeoman's work in that regard.
So let's go to Craig on the liquor license.
Okay, thank you. So the township has been in discussion for many months now. This liquor license application, although it coincides with some zoning matters that are also pending before the township council, it is not contingent upon the zoning. So this is standalone. We've made efforts to coordinate the handling of this application with the zoning ordinance, and that's partly why it's being introduced tonight, the zoning ordinance. But again, they're not contingent. They're not contingent upon one another. The license holder, based on the common ownership of this license and the adjoining premises, we believe that this is an appropriate attempt to expand the licensed premises. There are contiguous properties. They're not divided by any public thoroughfares. We believe that they fit the criteria laid out under New Jersey law. And while this is somewhat of a unique property, and certainly not merely a unique property in Berkeley Heights, but a unique property altogether, considering the common ownership and the contiguous nature of all the lots and blocks that are involved, we believe that this is, and we've made recommendations to the Township Council in this regard, that this form of license expansion is permitted and appropriate. As indicated, there have been months of negotiations and discussions in terms of attempting to arrive at what the scope and the nature of the types of expansion that they're looking to do are and or are not. And as a result of that negotiation and clarifications and information that was provided, including limitations and more precise delineations of this proposed expansion, the licensee and the township have arrived at what appears to be a mutually agreeable number, which is set forth in the resolution, subject, of course, to the vote of this council tonight to approve this license.
How many acres is the site for?
The acreage?
Yeah,
I don't know the
hotel from to how many acres?
I don't know the acreage size. I don't know if Keenan might know the full acreage on the property. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Keenan, but I thought you might know that information.
If it's not, okay, go ahead. Yeah, sorry, I didn't know.
Good evening. Yeah, I don't have the full acreage at my fingertips. I could dig it up. It would take me a few minutes.
It is a
Okay, can we put a clause on this? If it's not contingent upon the rezoning, can we put a clause on that license?
We want the money.
No, I mean that it's not contingent. It's like put it on the
It's not contingent because A, it can't be contingent, and B, it's not in the resolution now, so.
Okay.
And how long is it?
Basically, they can't ask for it back if the zoning gets denied. We get to keep the funds no matter what.
Keenan, maybe you can speak to the use of some of the proposed, or many of the proposed uses under the existing zoning that this would cover. I know you've taken a look at it, and again, the risk of not having any zoning is on Connell, but it's our understanding that many of the proposed uses, even without a zoning change, could be accomplished.
Right, and I would share that opinion. They can use the license to the extent that the zoning allows them to utilize their property. So under the current zoning, there is the ORA1 zone, which does permit a certain amount of retail. I'm not intimately familiar with the liquor license application, but there's certainly elements of it that would be permitted under the existing zoning. Again, if they're paying for some utilization that's not permitted, then they're proceeding at their own risk in terms of needing potential zoning changes to fully utilize that license. So I would agree with you.
So Keenan, can I just to quickly clarify? So in other words, the agreement that has been reached back as of 2017 would still enable them, should this resolution be approved, to use that revenue, or rather to use that license for properties they already would have the authority to do under the 2017.
Stephen, can I stop you for a second? If there's somebody other than the council, the clerk, the planner, and the attorneys that are not
muted,
please mute it, because I'm having a very hard time hearing. I feel like this is my county call every day. You have to say, please mute your line. Somebody's talking about football pools or something. I don't know.
Looks like Carlton Blake.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Stephen. Finish.
All right, so let me rephrase that in less convoluted language. So in other words, under the current approvals that the township has with Connell with regards to the property and the license associated with that property, irrespective of the zoning, whatever zoning changes might or might not be considered by the governing body tonight and so forth, they would still be able to use the liquor license as in the resolution for properties they already could build right now under the current agreement. Is that correct?
Yes, as I stated, there's elements.
Now you're talking about hockey. Whoever this is, please mute your line. I cannot hear. Leslie, can you figure it out? I'm actually working from home. Somebody's working from home. That's great.
That's my husband in the bedroom. He's talking too loud. Hold on.
I knew it was Russell. I knew it.
The mayor just called you out. Go away.
I think we all needed some help.
Okay.
So thank you for answering my question.
Okay, I lost track. Are we done with that answer?
Yep, I think we're good.
Okay, Deborah Bernarin, 20 Wardle. I never know if it's Wardle or Wardell. Hold on. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, it's actually Jeff Barnerin. So thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to talk. And what I want to do is actually, it's kind of a comment and a suggestion regarding any future change orders. So just as a little bit of background, while I'm trained as a scientist, I spent almost the last 20 years as a project manager, managing multi-billion-dollar projects that span 6 continents and employ thousands and thousands of resources. If you're getting to a point where you're having to leverage legal clauses in contracts or employ penalties, something has gone wrong a long time ago, a lot longer than 6 months ago when we should have been ringing the bell about delays, probably as much as a year. A company like Epic that has been in business for almost 50 years doesn't just behave like this because they want to. They're trying to sustain a business. It means we need to be managing the relationship in a more effective and close way, because it is through the relationship that vendors want to work for you. I don't think a company comes in here and wants to not work. It ruins their reputation. So I would ask that for the future going forward, as we continue to work with this particular vendor, that we work in a different way with them to help manage that relationship, so we're not souring our timeline and our costs even more. Additionally, and here's the suggestion, we've got 12 change orders on this project. My review of them has, or I'm unable to find as a review of all these change orders, any schedule implications detailed. They all say TBD. The second that you allow a vendor to not negotiate date, you take the floor right out from under you in your bargaining power negotiation. I run into this all the time. If you give up the power of a timeline, you give a vendor essentially free rein. I would be recommending that we not sign any future change orders without a commitment to schedule impact, and you could probably throw in there full budgetary impact. Because I heard a lot of conversation tonight about what's cost to complete, when's it going to complete, when are we going to have answers to those questions. We should have those before we actually sign the change orders.
Does that complete your comment, Jeff, or a question? I'm assuming so. Okay. Thank you. I don't know if Matt needs to address any of that.
I mean, I think he was providing some advice, and I thought some of it was very constructive and very helpful. I will add or sort of maybe echo the comment about relationships. You heard earlier comments about, you know, principals only meetings and trying to leverage relationships and keep this in a productive path versus a litigious one. And I think we are certainly still at the former, but you're hearing us start discussions about the latter, not because one is not given up, but because, you know, those are quite frankly just the next options. But I would certainly agree, and I think the whole team, you know, takes those believes those recommendations as well.
Thank you, Matt. Lose Liza? There she is.
I'm here. John Cicaglia, 22 Robbins. Okay, John, go ahead.
Okay, the documents that were shown before were very helpful to show, you know, what the questions, the amounts that were asked for. Where I'm having a problem, and I think maybe the rest of the public may be, is we know the project overall was budgeted for $32 million. We know the contract number, original contract number was 26.8. And now with this, with all the change orders that we've had up to now, and this one, it would be at 27.5. There were numbers thrown around by Ted, by Sean, and so forth, which you seem to have an understanding of, but the rest of us, we're lost in terms of where those numbers are coming from, because all we have is what's on the AIA document that's on the agenda. Is it possible, number one, to have a layout of, okay, we have $32 million for the project. Here's the contract cost for Epic, which by the way was for phase 1 and phase 2, I assume. And then to show all the other costs that flow into that, and then what's at risk. Second question I have is, Matt, you made a number of references to liquidated damages. How will that be computed, and how does that work out towards the end? And I guess you don't know that till the end, but how would that be evaluated? Another concern I have is if the project is delayed well into the fall, what happens to the library? The library can't stay there forever. Toll Brothers, I know we've asked them, and I think they've agreed up to a point to allow them to stay in the old rectory, but I don't know if that's a forever thing until they're ready to move into the new complex. So that's an issue that we're going to have to deal with. The other thing I noticed is I've been walking a lot around town during this pandemic, because that's about the only thing you can do. And I walk by the old train station down Sherman Avenue quite often. And when you're talking about 40 workers, I am telling you, on a lot of very nice days, okay, I could hardly see anyone doing any work there. And this is in the middle of the afternoon. So I question whether or not those people were really there. And if they were there, were they there for a full work day, or was somebody there for 2 hours and that counted for part of their people? With respect to the change order, the other question I have is last month, and I asked this question, we had a $325,000 change order, and I was told it was for bad soil. And I see again tonight, there's another $44,000. Where did we miss that the last month? And some of the other things on there, I'm just wondering, it amazes me that we could have almost $90,000 for some antennas. But, you know, I leave that to the construction experts. And that's pretty much all I have.
Okay, thank you, John. So I think I can answer number one. I know Liza is preparing a budget that she wanted to circulate to the council after the discussion tonight, and that will be on the website this week. So, and I think what I've asked her to do is make it a more simplistic format than some of the other documents that we've had, that it's easier for everyone to follow. So she's in the process of working on that. So that should be on the website, John. A library, Liza can speak to this as well, but she's been in contact with Toll Brothers to make sure that they understand what's going on with the municipal complex and the timing. They seem to be fine with that. But in addition, Matt, we have 90 days to exercise. If Toll said, hey, we want to construct, we have 90 days to slow them down, for lack of a better word. I'm sure you've got a better legal word than I do tonight.
That's correct, Mayor. So at the point when Toll Brothers has all of their governmental approvals, and right now the largest one that they're missing is their treatment works approval permit from DEP, which is a couple of months away. At that point, they are entitled to come to the township and request a closing on the sale of the Hamilton Avenue property, at which point, as John points out, there's an issue with the library staying on the property once Toll buys it and closes on it. When Toll comes to us at that point, we are allowed to seek a 90-day extension of the closing date. So for starters, you're always 90 days away. And as we talked about getting a project done by the middle of October, which is, 5 months away, right? So you're close there. They are also still a couple months away from getting their TWA permit, as at least they tell us. So at the moment, it appears that the timing of the two will line up. Absent the contract, we also have been talking to Toll, and it certainly seems that if we needed an extra couple weeks to make sure we responsibly move the library into their new home, that would not likely be an issue.
Okay, great. And then in terms of Ted, or Sean or Eric, whoever's left on the line here, speak to the staffing. I think that Ted pointed out that there were 46 people on the site, I think today or yesterday, and 41 previous, and 2 different masonry subcontractors. So it's been going in the right direction, at least in the last week. But prior to that, I think everyone has been concerned about the staffing of the subcontractors.
What about I wanted Matt to respond about how liquidated damages were calculated.
Yeah, John, I wasn't gonna let that go. Don't worry. I don't know if Mayor, you want me to go now, or you want Ted?
I'm sorry, I did not note that.
Yeah, no. Yeah, John, I got you. So the way the contract works, there are 4 enumerated time frames, or I'm sorry, there are 3 milestone completion dates in the contract. I think I mentioned them earlier. Each one has a scheduled completion date. For each one, when Epic misses that date, they are assigned a liquidated damages amount per day based on the number of days behind the completion date that they ultimately finish. And the way in this particular case that schedule works is, for the first 30 days that they are late, they're charged a certain daily amount for every single day. For the next 30 days that they're late, that fee doubles. And then for the next day and however many days it takes after, so basically from day 61 on, they're charged a fee that's 50% higher than for the second phase. So basically the liquidated damages escalate every 30 days, and then once you get past the 60 days, it stays at that fee on a running basis. So for each of the 3 milestones, the team will look at when the project was supposed to be completed, when the project is allowed to be complete based on the excusable day delays that you heard Sean and Ted talk about earlier, and then any difference between that date and the actual end date will be, those number of days will be run through that math and will determine the liquidated damages for each of those 3 phases.
Okay, thank you, Matt. We'll do the next comment, but I just want to point out that after this, we need to go back, and we did not appropriately adopt the sewer ordinance, and we'll need to do roll call. So after this, we're going to go back to the sewer ordinance. Thank you, Anna.
I think we only did the citizens hearing for the ordinance, correct?
We didn't even do that. All right, so let's finish up the citizens hearing, then we're gonna have to go backwards to the sewer ordinance and just make sure we adopt that properly and do a roll call. We were just too excited to get to the citizens hearing.
So we have Josh Bachner, 29 Cinnamon Tree Lane. Okay, you're unmuted.
Good evening. First, I want to say to Mast, just stay out of our elections. Your involvement last year in our local elections, in my opinion, is highly unethical. And while we've been talking tonight about relationships to move this project forward, what a fast way to destroy relationships with people in town by, spending money against them. Next, I have a comment on the no-knock ordinance. Thank you, Susan, for making some of the changes I suggested. However, the ordinance is still not ready. I'm focused on how this affects our First Amendment rights for non-commercial speech. The time limitations in the ordinance are unconstitutional. Political canvassing will not be allowed after 30 minutes past sunset. I see that a new whereas clause was added related to this to signify legislative intent. However, extremely similar language was struck down in the case New Jersey Environmental Federation versus Monroe Township. So the courts have already struck this down. But to give some examples of why this is so problematic, in the days before the November election, it will be dark before many residents get home from work, so they'll be totally inaccessible to canvassers. On election day itself, the polls will be open for several hours after dark, so candidates and their volunteers would be forbidden from doing some of the most get out the vote canvassing. It not only affects the rights of the canvassers, it also affects the rights of those residents, like myself, who do wish to receive political canvassers in the evenings. Additionally, the different time restrictions for Sundays are discriminatory against those who observe a religious day of rest on Saturdays, because their ability to canvass is greatly reduced compared to those who observe a religious day of rest on Sundays. So the ordinance is still not ready to go forward until the time restrictions on this protected non-commercial speech are changed. And then finally, I have some questions about Connell. Liza, I am going to copy and paste and send them to you just so that way you don't need to write all of them down. So Connell is matching $25,000 of contributions in support of our local businesses, but they're also appealing their tax assessments. Am I correct that the town could lose out on way more than $25,000 in tax revenue if they're successful, which would result in residents and other businesses paying more in taxes? Next, Connell has presented the town council with an extremely rosy projection for the amount they pay in taxes for the new development. Is there any reason to believe that Connell will not just appeal the taxes on the new development if they're assessed at those numbers? Next, the mayor has previously said that the Economic Development Committee is in favor of the zoning changes. However, Connell itself is a member of that committee. The committee meetings are also supposed to be public, but the past several meetings have not had agendas or meeting times publicly posted. Have you consulted with other downtown businesses outside of the committee to find out what they think? Next, Connell has made annual contributions of $10,000 to the Union County Democratic Committee in recent years. Are you aware of any other political contributions Connell, its owners, subsidiaries, or business partners have made in recent years in Berkeley Heights and Union County? Next, where does the zoning ordinance mandate that the new open spaces actually be available to all residents of Berkeley Heights, given that the definition of open space does not guarantee this access? And is the public guaranteed a substantial amount of free parking spots to actually enable their use of the open space? Next, what penalties will be levied if Connell does not meet their promises to the township in a timely manner, and where are they written or enforced? And finally, why is Connell being exempted from Part 19 of the Municipal Land Use Procedures, the Design Standards section? That's all. Thank you.
Do you want me to go first since the no-knock was the first thing that Josh mentioned? Would you like me to address that, Mayor?
Yes, Susan, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So Josh, again, thank you for your passion. You're a very passionate person. I love passion. So Mr. Dowd and I were talking about this, and there is a rational basis for the restriction on the time. So it's easier to justify a curfew based on lightness and darkness for the safety of not just the residents, but also for the solicitors. So in the dark winter nights when it's 5 o'clock and it's dark, you know, people maybe are not so comfortable with people approaching their home in darkness. Also for the solicitor themselves, if there are icy patches and they fall, that becomes another whole set of situations. So there are more dangers on property at nighttime than during the daytime. So that was one of the rationales that we put the time frame on there. If you look at the 12-month year, it actually extends the amount of time that solicitors can approach homes, because during your summer months, as we all know, it's lighter longer. So it's 30 minutes past the sunset. So if you average it out, there's actually more time for solicitors to solicit. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Susan. I don't know.
Can I just quickly add to what Susan's saying? When we're talking about political candidates or political campaigns, I think it's been stated before, but again, under the First Amendment, they're not limited or prohibited, because again, that's not how the First Amendment works with regards to freedom of speech. I know the ordinance has been put forward covers that issue. And so I just want to make sure people are clear about that. Sorry for interrupting, Madam Mayor.
No, I was going to ask Keenan or Matt if they could answer any of that. I was trying to catch them as quickly as I could, but if there was anything in there that you could jump into. I know that that Matt has been in contact with Paul Beiser, who does our appraisals, and has been reviewing the revenue projections provided by Connell. I don't know if there's an update. I think Paul said he was about a week away from providing a written report.
Matt's muted.
Matt's muted.
Hold on. Okay.
Thank you, Liza. Yes, Mayor. So as Josh mentioned, Connell has provided a pro forma, and Paul is scrubbing that pro forma for the benefit of the township to serve a couple purposes. One, to understand the underlying foundations, including vacancy rate, which is something that Manny had asked about once before. And two, this is really the process, I mean, Josh hit on it, this is really the process by which how the assessment ultimately gets determined is through a full and complete understanding of the revenue assumptions and the revenues realized for a project like this. So Paul has started that process. He has not completed it. His initial review generally is that the residential rental revenue numbers look low. His review generally is also that the revenue numbers for the retail in a vacuum look high, but Paul is just now getting into understanding what the actual stack of that retail will look like, right? At 185,000 square feet of retail, there's a big difference between 30-some 5,000 square foot retail bays and, 3 or 4 30,000 square foot bays, and then a handful of 5,000 square foot bays. So that's critical to ultimately him completing that piece of the analysis. So bottom line, residential numbers look a little low. Retail numbers may look a little high. You'll recall from the pro forma that they're about 50-50 in the total analysis. But ultimately, he will complete that. He'll provide, the feedback back to the council. And that will serve a secondary purpose again, which is that ultimately it is the starting foundation for determining the correct assessed value to decrease the likelihood that the project is not assessed properly and results in a tax appeal in the future.
Okay, thank you, Matt. As it relates to the Economic Development Committee, I think that last meeting we had was sort of an emergency response to some of the businesses and how they were feeling, and we wanted to get the group together to try to discuss ways to remedy that. So we did not get the agenda published. I'm not really sure that we had a written agenda. It was more of a listening session, but we'll certainly get that done for this week. So appreciate that reminding me to put that on my to-do
I'll
list.
share the link for that.
And I know that Albert can post minutes as well, right?
Yep, and I neglected to send them over to the township for posting, so I will care for that immediately. My
Great.
apologies.
Okay, we have Tom Forager, 14 Dorset. Now, hold on, he's got two identities here. Tom, I think I just unmuted reconnecting. Can you say something? Tom Forager?
That's his
Muted.
secret identity.
Okay, you're good, you're good.
Oh, now I'm unmuted by the host.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I support what Josh Botner said, and I'll get into some more details on that. First, though, Resolution 6C is Arbor Day. Why are we approving a resolution for Arbor Day after the day has passed? Next. Next, second whereas clause in this soliciting and peddling ordinance. How many people claim to have a level of discomfort with peddlers and solicitors? What is the evidence for this claim? Would it be not simpler to just have residents that do not want peddlers and solicitors to just put up a sign on their property to that effect? I believe you can buy a sign from Amazon. It doesn't cost you very much. Next, do Girl Scouts selling cookies need a license? Next, do Halloween trick-or-treaters need a license? And with regard to those that are exempt from licensing, I would like to see the legal analysis that says a curfew starting a half hour after sunset is permissible under New Jersey and federal law. So those are the questions. Now, I did run across an article in 2018 in October where Hopatcong revised their ordinance. Their township attorney said, quote, a lot of towns had ordinances that cut off soliciting and peddling at 6 or 7 p.m., commented Borough Attorney John Urson at the October 3rd council meeting. That was in 2018. The U.S. Supreme Court decision came out and said that was really not a legitimate opportunity for somebody to go door to door because people aren't normally home between 5 or 6. And the Supreme Court set the time to 9 p.m. That's also consistent with something where the borough attorney and Freehold Borough said New Jersey case law, you cannot restrict before 9 p.m. So that's why I want to see the legal analysis. You cited a rational basis standard, but I think in these First Amendment things, they use another standard called intermediate scrutiny. So I want to see the legal analysis before you go any further with this. But I really question whether you even need this at all. You don't issue that many licenses, and I think it's just kind of unnecessary. Thank you.
Okay, I can tackle number one. Number one, the Arbor Day resolution is needed for a grant that Tom Baca, our zoning officer, is applying for.
I can speak to people complaining. The whole reason this came up, this no-knock ordinance, was because a certain company, Craig, can I name the company? Okay, certain pest control company, last year was extremely, extremely aggressive in their solicitation. We were flooded with calls about this company. And in the end, this company sued, or Craig?
There were threats of litigation that were resolved.
Okay, thank you. Which is what made us initially take a look at this no-knock ordinance and the current one on the books and realize that some of the provisions were outdated or needed to be updated to comport with current court cases or whatnot. But absolutely, people were very, very concerned, especially with the aggressive nature of these people who were soliciting. So just based on from the recipients of the resident calls, I can tell you that the residents that did call us were concerned.
I'm going to tackle the third part. Tom, you can still get your Girl Scout cookies. No worries. Those Girl Scouts will be knocking on your door, and the Halloween trick-or-treaters as well. So you can stock up on your candy.
It's just for profit, right? And this is an amendment to existing ordinance. It's not a new ordinance.
I'd just like to to jump in just for a second. My associate Neil Bernardo is going to address some of those, try to address some of those specific questions in a second. But in terms of the language that's in the whereas clauses of the ordinance, discussions and communications relating to this ordinance have been going on for over a year. And we learned that in years past, there were complaints about the lack of there being a no-knock provision within the township code, even though the then existing township code did provide for the ability of a resident to put a sign up, which they can do. That's certainly their prerogative, ordinance or not. It's their prerogative if they don't want anyone coming on their property. The issue that Liza was referring to last year, which led to revisiting and assessing this ordinance, was because the components of the ordinance were, in our opinion, unconstitutional as it relates to solicitors within the township. That's why this ordinance was being changed later. It was determined to add the no-knock provisions so that it would be made easier for residents who don't want anyone coming under any circumstances or under certain circumstances to be able to sign up. Some of those more specific questions and the constitutionality issues, I'm going to let my associate Neil Bernardo speak to them. But I can tell you, as the township attorney, we've done quite a bit of research. I'm not going to be providing our legal analysis that we've put together and broadcasting that, but I will tell you that we are quite satisfied as to the constitutionality of the provisions in the newly amended ordinance that's before you tonight. And Neil, if you want to address some of those.
Neil, can you try? Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I had muted myself because Craig and I are actually in the same conference room right now. So,
So Craig has to mute himself now.
I just did.
Yeah, okay, good. Go ahead, Neil.
He's frozen.
Craig, did you not spring for the good Wi-Fi in the office?
the curfew. So under the First Amendment, there are activities such as, canvassing for political charitable purposes that are protected by the First Amendment. However, municipalities are still allowed to subject those activities to reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. So I just wanted to assure the mayor and council that our research and advice was based on binding Third Circuit case law that has upheld similar provisions based and linked to the daylight hours of the day for these activities, as well as the Supreme Court precedent suggesting that these activities are subject to regulation. A lot of the Supreme Court cases that deal with canvassing or solicitation of this nature are generally focused more on outright prohibition of these activities or requiring a permit to engage in advocacy or political canvassing, which is not what this ordinance does. So I think, as Craig mentioned, we are we've surveyed the federal case law and we're quite satisfied that it meets constitutional muster.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Next, Liza.
Okay, Tom Medeski, 40 Ralph Place. Hold on, Tom. I have to find you. My eyes are literally starting to go. Okay. All right,
Hello?
go ahead.
You can hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, I just want to say that I agree with Josh Poshner and Tom Farger regarding this no knock, and I'm very concerned. The more I hear about it, the more I'm concerned about it. But I just want to spend my time making a statement about the this municipal building. Where the municipal building project went wrong is when the estimate for the building went up from 19 million to 26 million without adjusting the overall budget. At that point, the contingencies were slashed and parts of the project were put into phase 2 to shoehorn the project into our budget. The project was from the beginning more of a wish list than a realistic project. The scope could have been cut at the point when the quotes came back at 26 million. Bypassing the normal bidding process also reduced our bid pool significantly. The project was set up to fail from the start, while assuring residents the entire time that it is fully under control. The way that this municipal building project was bid and negotiated, anyone could, and in fact they did predict that this was going to happen. We overextended ourselves and the planning was too faith-based. Anyone who made these terrible mistakes clearly failed in their fiduciary duty to the residents and should seriously consider resigning. Thank you.
Okay, Liza, next comment, please.
Okay, yes, I have Sean Kane, 46 Sycamore. Hold on, Sean. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, good. There's like 50 some people in here. Okay, Sean, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Just a quick comment and a question. So someone else previously asked a really good question about the Connell liquor license. I had a statement and a question. So it sounds like there may not be a contingency for the approval of the zoning, but what happens if the zoning isn't approved and Connell isn't satisfied with their ability to, implement whatever sort of retail or restaurant where they like to have the liquor available, correct? So is there any recourse? Are we putting ourselves in a bad position because we're not doing both of these things at the same time, and we're kind of asking for the amount for the liquor license before we actually have the zoning approved?
Are those all your questions, Sean?
Yeah, so are we putting ourselves in any sort of legal risk if Connell is not happy with, for example, if the zoning is not approved?
Got it. Okay, thank you. Craig, do you want to address that?
You said, the risk is really on Connell. The zoning, again, although it's been coordinated in a way that the introduction of the zoning is being done tonight. If for some reason the zoning changes aren't made in the near term, there are still under the existing zoning. Connell will be able to do many of the things that they've proposed to do as part of the sort of major improvements that they're planning. I think that everyone's aware of for their site. And there's also nothing to stop them from seeking zoning changes again in the future, or attempting to modify their liquor license again in the future. So.
But if the resolution for the amount of $475,000 is passed this evening, I know there's a time frame in which the state has to approve it, but 15 days after that, the check is cut regardless of the zoning. The two are not linked.
They're not linked legally, no.
Right. Okay. Just want to make that point. Okay, great. Thank you, Craig. Liza?
Okay, next we have Doug Beerbauer, 103 Briarwood. All right, Doug. All right, go ahead.
Okay. I just have a quick comment. With respect to the municipal building project, I think the instinct to delay phase 2, given our uncertain economy, is a good instinct. But I do want to point out to the council that delaying phase 2 delays only spending. It doesn't actually delay the revenue we need to raise through taxes that is associated with phase 2, because we're not paying as we go, we're borrowing. And when you're borrowing, the taxes are associated with the debt service, not with the construction spending. If we assume that phase 2 will merely be delayed and not canceled, it would actually, in my opinion, it would be cheaper in the long run to complete phase 2 under the existing GMP, because this will avoid the cost of a rebid. It will avoid the cost of bonding twice, and it will also allow us to take advantage of the interest rates today, which are all-time lows. When we are structuring our bonds, the debt service can and should be adjusted to account for our projected lower revenue, given the conditions. So I just urge the council to consider this.
Thank you, Doug.
Okay. So next we have Cy Bargave, 146 Robbins. I think I'm asking for her. So these are municipal complex related. One, did the township get alerted by our project management consultants about the continuously pushed back projected end date? If yes, how many timely updates on project slippage were we given? How can Epic submit project change orders without providing an impact on schedule? What's the new project completion date provided by Epic? And how do we plan to hold them accountable to this new date? So I think I unmuted, you guys keep muting yourselves. I unmuted Sean, Ted.
Yep.
Go ahead, Sean.
Liza, I'll take this one. So as far as answering the question of have we provided timely or have we notified the township of the schedule slippages? Yes, we've done that all along. Epic provides their monthly schedule updates. The township has been aware of all the schedule updates all along. Going back as early as September of 2019, we put Epic on notice that we disagree with their current schedule, with their schedule at the time. And something I just want to make clear here: it's not that change orders have been approved to date with the schedule completion date of TBD, because there's no agreed upon date between any of the parties as to when that contractual date should move. With their schedule submissions, Epic submits a delay table that includes what they believe to be the associated days that they are finding to be excusable on their behalf. We're disputing that. We did a full schedule analysis that we presented to the township back in September before we put Epic on notice and asked them for a recovery schedule. We have made a collective decision with consulting with Matt not to share that data with Epic, simply because that would be doing their homework for them. So the answer to the question is yes, we have been in tune with the township all along. We have notified them. Epic actually has indicated what they believe the delays to be. The reason that the delay is not shown on the change order is simply because it's not an agreed upon date. Did I miss anything there, Liza?
Schedule completion date.
Yes.
And what we said before was based on the approved change orders, they will submit the time impact to the schedule, a final completion schedule.
Right.
And how do we hold them accountable for that?
If Matt takes the position that he defaults them, the job will stop. We are monitoring the progress and the manpower on a daily basis.
And if I can just add, Liza, I think you heard us talk earlier about a variety of other things, the building becoming weather tight, the change orders being cleared, the relationship reach out but amongst the principals, the responding increase in the manpower over the last couple of days in response to that, those two principal meetings. The few things I'd rather not talk about again that Mark mentioned as default and surety bond options going forward. All of those things are on the table in terms of methods and means to enforce getting them to completion.
All right, thanks, Matt. Next question, Liza.
We have Yes, we have Margaret Ellis. There she is. Okay. Margaret Ellis, 102 Twin Falls Road. Oh, hold on. Oops. Hold on. Okay. Now go ahead.
Good evening. I'd like to start with thanking the mayor and Liza and MAST and the town council for managing the municipal complex project under very difficult conditions. I appreciate, as a citizen, I appreciate the updates and everything that the township is doing to get this project completed. A couple of notes. First of all, agendas and minutes, especially for committees, are lacking for most of the year, this year in 2020. So I don't know how to get those without reaching out to the committees individually. I was told that the Township Council was behind on doing minutes. I know you approved another set of minutes tonight, but until tonight, the only 2 minutes that were approved for 2020 were January. So that just makes it very difficult for residents to stay informed. So I'm speaking generally about the Connell rezoning. I agree with the comments that Mark Fasher made earlier regarding the liquor license and how it's confusing that the liquor license is being issued for the entire property of Connell instead of for a specific purpose, because Connell is such a large corporate site. As many of you know, I'm sorry, as many of you know, I am not supportive of the rezoning of the Connell property for a variety of reasons, primarily of which is the negative impact to traffic down in the Diamond Hill and Valley area. Secondarily is the potential negative impact to our downtown. Residents have said clearly through the survey that was issued regarding the master plan that they want a vibrant downtown. They're not asking for a vibrant alternate downtown at Connell Corporate Park. So I haven't heard anything about what we're doing to support our downtown businesses. I heard how challenging the business environment is, and now the town council is proposing to grant Connell an additional 100,000 square feet of retail space, which will be in direct competition with our downtown businesses. So I've heard that will be, according to Susan Pogue's letter on tap, that you'll be working with Connell in order to make sure that they're choosing businesses that don't compete. I would like to know how that's being codified or put into a contract somewhere so that we can hold them to those agreements. If there's a dry cleaner, is that going to be the branch of a dry cleaner that already exists in town? Or is all of the dry cleaning for those now new businesses going to go to a new service that exists down in Connell and therefore takes business away from our community? At the very least, additional restrictions should be put in place instead of the very broad permissions that are being granted. I've heard from the planner at multiple meetings. Whenever I ask where this additional 100,000 square feet of retail space is going to be located, I'm told generally at the western end of the site, but now I hear this evening that the township is actually working with Connell on the specifics of the sizes of the stores. So if the township is aware of specifically what store sizes there are, why can't the residents be informed of the general schematic plans that include the locations of those retail spaces and any planning or concept drawings that Connell has? Thank you.
So,
Thank you, Margaret.
Liza, if I could just weigh in here, you sent out a document earlier today that I thought would be really helpful to explain the Connell rezoning. And if I could ask you to pop that up, and because I think there's a lot of confusion as to whenever we talk about this, nobody has a map in front of them. And so it'd be really helpful if we could just pop that up. If you go to that, I think it's the second slide.
Yeah. All right, can you see it?
Go to the second slide.
Okay.
slide 2.
Oh, slide 2, okay. This is on our website, by the way, under redevelopment. It's under Connell under redevelopment. This
So, and it might be helpful to kind of highlight the areas that we're talking about. So this is the current sort of stratified zoning that we have today. And I'm probably, Keenan jump in and tell me to shut up and sit down at any point that you want. But I just want to make sure that the public is aware of what we're planning, what Connell is planning to do. And so right now, if you can see, ORA1 is basically where this little quote unquote downtown is planned for. ORB, this ORB, to the right of it is where the hotel is. The one to the right of that is where this 200 Connell property is located, which is sort of a WeWorks kind of a project. Just to the crossing the border, if you will, you see that is where the Grove Park is, just on the lower end. The North Grove is intended to go north of that, in that upper sort of right-hand or left-hand corner of the next largest ORB segmentation. And then this trail that I think has been mentioned a couple of times in their plans goes all the way around that and all the way back to the hotel. So that's what the concept is. And if you go to this next slide, Liza. This is why that makes more sense, because now you take down artificial barriers to doing what they're trying to do. And a good example of what the challenge that they face is, if you go to the next slide, Liza, is this. This is that one sort of downtown, and you can see the boundaries of the ORA1, and you can see the plans that they have for that overlap. They extend past the boundaries. So essentially, they can't do what they envision doing based upon these stratified zones. And so that's the rationale for their asking of this rezoning, to me, is basically simplifying achieving their vision. And I would recommend that everybody, or folks that are interested, take a look at or listen to the streaming video from April 23rd of 2019, which is when Connell came in and talked about all of these plans. That went into a lot of detail about what their vision is and what constraints they're facing and what they're hoping to achieve. And the open space is a considerable element of their plan. And so there is no question in my mind that they're going to keep the open space there, and that it's going to be a good addition to the development. So I probably talked way out beyond my headlights, but Keenan, if you have anything to weigh in on that, I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. I think that was an excellent overview. You're almost ready for your professional planner's license.
I'm submitting now.
I do want to just add a couple of points, and the first would tie into the traffic impacts. And I want to point out again that under the existing zoning, there is no limitation on the total buildable area on this property. They're simply subject to the existing zoning controls in terms of setbacks, height, parking requirements, and so forth. So they can actually build an additional 1.2 million square feet of office space on this property. And that's in addition to the 85,000 square feet of retail and the 328 residential units, which they can build under existing current zoning. What we're trying to do with the zoning ordinance is actually place a cap on development, not just in the ORA1, but across the majority of the Connell Park property that was reflected on that map, which you just saw. So we're going from a potential development yield of 3.1 million square feet down to 2.25 million square feet. So that has implications for traffic, certainly. And there's two aspects of that. One is just less development means less traffic, on a gross basis in terms of overall trip generation, but also in that we're moving towards not just less development, but diversifying the uses on site. That's going to help balance out the traffic impacts to different peak periods throughout the week. So instead of a large office park where you have everyone coming in the morning and everyone leaving in the evening, we're going to have a much more balanced distribution of traffic generation during the week. I also wanted to just respond to the point that was made about the master plan, and specifically the master plan survey in relation to the downtown. It's interesting, as you may be aware, we did complete a pretty extensive community survey in connection with the master plan effort earlier this year. And when folks were asked what uses, types of development are currently missing in Berkeley Heights, by a wide margin, respondents expressed the need for more commercial businesses, number one, but parks and open space, and specifically more public spaces to convene and engage in recreation. That was actually identified as number two. So that's clearly going to be provided as part of this development of the site. And number three was actually more entertainment venues. And you'll see in the ordinance, we've actually carved out a portion of the permissible retail and dedicated that to potential entertainment type venues, such as a bowling alley or a movie theater. Also, there were numerous comments in the master plan survey about the need for a dog park and more walking trails, both of which will be provided as part of this. And also, when asked what types of businesses people would like to see in Berkeley Heights, number one was boutique shops, restaurants, cafes. Two, sidewalk cafes with terraces and outdoor activity areas. Three, specialty organic grocers. And we know that the Connells are actively trying to recruit that type of user to the site. And a number of comments mentioned specifically movie theaters and entertainment venues. So I actually think that with this rezoning, we're going to be advancing and accomplishing a lot of the desires and objectives that we heard through the master plan. The downtown, this is going to be more of a destination-oriented use. The downtown, we're working to redevelop that, but it's more on an incremental basis, project by project. There is an overall vision for the downtown, which will be part of the master plan. But this is really an opportunity in one fell swoop with a single owner who's well capitalized to actually implement a lot of this stuff in the short term. And again, the downtown is going to be a longer term process, but the two are not mutually exclusive. I think that's the bottom line. And then finally, I just want to be clear, I'm not aware of any plans or analysis of specific store sizes that are part of these plans. I mean, I know obviously they're going to be out there recruiting tenants to the site. Some of them, they'll actually operate on their own, but I'm not aware of any detailed plans on store sizes with respect to the retail.
Okay, thank you, Keenan.
Thank you.
I want to double back because it is getting late. We need to double back and officially pass the sewer connection fee ordinance. So Anna, should we just start all over?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
let's just start all over. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll be quick on that one.
To close the citizens.
We have to close the citizens hearing.
Yep. Have a motion for that?
Anybody make a motion to close the citizens hearing?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Brahimai?
Yes.
Mr. Kudo?
Yes.
Mrs. Kingsley?
Yes.
Mrs. Burrows?
Yes.
Mrs. Pogue?
Yes.
Mr. Yellen?
Yes.
Okay, Anna, please read the ordinance again. I apologize for not completing it.
An ordinance of the Township of Berkeley Heights, County of Union, State of New Jersey, amending Title 13 Public Services at Chapter 13.12 Sewer Service System.
I move to open the public hearing on the ordinance as read by the clerk.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Brahimai?
Yes.
Mr. Kudo?
Yes.
Mrs. Kingsley?
Yes.
Mr. Maderos?
Yes.
Mrs. Pogue?
Yes.
Mr. Yellen?
Yes.
The hearing on the ordinance is now. Liza, do we have any takers?
No, not on the sewer.
Okay. I hereby move to close the public hearing on the ordinance as read by the clerk.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Brahimai?
Yes.
Mr. Kudo?
Yes.
Mrs. Kingsley?
Yes.
Mr. Maderos?
Yes.
Mrs. Pogue?
Yes.
Mr. Yellen?
Yes.
I move that the ordinance as read by the clerk and hearing held herein be adopted on final passage and the clerk be directed to advertise same in the Courier News.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Brahimai?
Yes.
Mr. Kudo?
Yes.
Mrs. Kingsley?
Yes.
Mr. Maderos?
Yes.
Mrs. Pogue?
Yes.
Mr. Yellen?
Yes.
You got it right this time, Anna?
Got it right.
All right.
Yeah.
Passing grade.
All right.
Okay. I move resolution number 1, resolution approving bill list dated May 12th, 2020 in the amount of $433,842.91.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Brahimai?
Yes.
Mr. Kudo?
Yes.
Mrs. Kingsley?
Yes.
Mr. Maderos?
Yes.
Mrs. Pogue?
Yes.
Mr. Yellen?
Yes.
Move resolution number 2, designating block 614, lot 3 as a non-condemnation area in need of redevelopment, Mondelli-182 Plainfield Avenue.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Brahimai?
Yes.
Mr. Kudo?
Yes.
Mrs. Kingsley?
Yes.
Mr. Maderos?
Yes.
Mrs. Pogue?
Yes.
Mr. Yellen?
Yes.
Correct resolution number 2 to number 3.
Yep.
And number 3 says, number 3, resolution authorizing the amendment of 2020 temporary appropriations.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Brahimai?
Yes.
Mr. Kudo?
Yes.
Mrs. Kingsley?
Yes.
Mr. Maderos?
Yes.
Mrs. Pogue?
Yes.
Mr. Yellen?
Yes.
I move resolution number 4, authorizing the expansion of the plenary retail consumption license based at 250 Connell Drive, Berkeley Heights, in the amount of $475,000.
Second. Any discussion? Roll call.
The,
Go
I
ahead.
just one quick discussion. I know it's getting late. I'm still not getting the answers I was looking for on this one, because the license is being expanded to the entire complex, basically. And what was originally proposed and discussed was the license was going to be used for whimsical events and catered events. And now it seems to be the license has been expanded into restaurant usage and seasonal outdoor serving areas.
I'm going to add to Manny that I'm going to say that Manny and I worked really hard into getting $150,000 more to that. The original price was $325,000. And, you know, to Manny's point, I think that I believe that they bought another license in town for $525,000. I absolutely know that we need the money, but I'm still unclear as far as, you know, as far as the use of the license in all the areas. You know, this license seems way too, you know, it's expanded a lot. So I'm not quite sure on that either.
If you look at some of the, if you look at the different buildings, though, it does say part of first floor, all of second floor, but then it says for special events only. It's not like it's going to be a 24/7
that part I have
liquor
no
license.
problem with. My concern was with the license usage, and I sent Craig an email, and it didn't get through to his defense, and so I called him today on it, and we discussed a few things on the thing, and it's still not clear. But the license can be expanded to 2 restaurants. So there's 2 restaurants using the hotel license on the outdoor area. So what we've done is expanded the license into 2 restaurant areas.
Do you want to speak to the legalities of that, Craig? Because I think we've discussed it amongst the governing body quite a bit, but I don't know that we've discussed it with the public and explained how it works. And certainly the whole idea that the developer can go to the state and within 60 days could get approval and there'd be no revenue to the township.
That's right.
Well, this wasn't a process, you know, that was conducted in a vacuum. It wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
Short
That's a
process.
full discussion.
There was quite a bit of discussion. This, as I mentioned earlier, and in response to some of the public comments, this is a unique property. It's unique in a lot of ways, but as I said, not just to Berkeley Heights. And the common ownership and the contiguous nature of all the lots and blocks that are involved in this proposed expansion qualifies it for, in our opinion, for the scope and the uses that are proposed. The licensee engaged the township to negotiate compensation for what is an expansion, a transfer, what's called a place-to-place transfer for expansion of the premises, when they didn't necessarily have to. but they saw that there was a, they recognized the unique nature of this particular application. The original license was issued for $325,000. This is a hotel license. This is not a license that can be transferred to someone who's looking to open up a restaurant or some other type of facility serving alcohol somewhere else in town. Despite that, they've come to the table through the negotiations, and the total license, when you combine the original license cost to issue the license to them and what's been negotiated for this expansion is a total of $800,000, which is quite sizable, and particularly for a hotel license.
Not for a hotel this size. This is a what was the phrase Keenan used? Destination-oriented use, which puts it akin to something in Orlando.
No, we're not going to build Disney World, Manny.
No, I didn't want to say that. I'm just trying to find a way to.
But that $800,000 compares favorably to similar sized operations such as Homedale. That's roughly what they paid for the license.
And then Homedale is still not a destination type oriented place.
The model
and
for what they're doing.
is Homedale licensed the exact same thing? I'm just again, I still have some serious concerns with this one, and I'm trying to voice this out right now in public, as has been requested, to try to have a better understanding. So if we have over here a destination license and there's 2 active restaurants off site on this hotel for a project that's probably looks like it's going to be what, 300 acres, 600 acres. That's a lot of property to cover for one license.
Nowhere
How
near
big is
that
this
big.
thing?
It's 100. I did dig up some additional information. It's about 100 to 120 acres. The total site.
That's pretty big.
But yeah, it's a sizable expansion. Nobody, including the applicant, denies that. There's plenty of detail in the application as supplemented through the various communications that we've had that were including the most recent supplement on April 28th. I haven't been around Berkeley Heights for a long time, so I can't speak to necessarily the relationship that this particular property owner has with the town. But my understanding is that those people that are familiar with this complex know that they're only looking and have only looked to do very high quality building operations, staffing, and the like. So there's from that standpoint, there's no reason to believe that they're going to be turning this into a Disney type situation. And I think there are reasonable limits within the existing application as supplemented that would address that. Not to mention the fact that, as we're all aware, with the various plans and drawings, diagrams that have been provided, that they're looking to put in a very sort of high level overall reinvention of their property as it surrounds the hotel to help make the hotel a lot more viable, as well as their corporate park in what's recently become a pretty tough environment. But
so would it be fair to say that what you're asking is for us to trust them because they're going to be doing something upscale?
No, you need to trust the representations that were made in the application, because we're going to hold them to them.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want to belabor the point, but we have had how many months and months and months in which
I've had the same discussion for months and months and months. It's been an ongoing discussion for months and months. From the time they gave us the low offer in the beginning to the time we negotiated it up. So
Right,
it's not been stopped.
Stephen, we had a discussion last week about this. What are you talking about?
I think it was actually 2 weeks ago.
Last week ago. Okay, yeah.
Last Monday was the municipal conference.
Yeah.
I think it was 2 weeks ago we had the executive.
Yeah.
So let's do this. Unless anybody has any other questions, I'm going to call roll call.
Okay.
Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Brahimai?
I'm going to vote no for now.
Mr. Kudo?
Is he muted?
No, I'm.
Oh, he's thinking.
Okay, I thought you were muted again.
You can smell the smoke from here. I'm gonna have to say, as much as I don't want Susan has to be unmuted.
Oh, no, Susan's muted.
Let's just be unmuted. I'm going to say no.
Mrs. Kingsley?
I need to recuse myself, just in abundance of caution on this topic.
Mr. Medeiros?
Yes.
Mrs. Pogue?
Yes.
Mr. Yellen?
Yes.
Resolution 5?
Yep. Okay, resolution number 5. Resolution authorizing the change to municipal complex redevelopment project.
Second.
Second.
Discussion? We had a lot of discussion on this one.
Yeah.
Okay, roll call?
Mrs. Brahimai?
Yes.
Mr. Kudo?
Yes.
Mrs. Kingsley?
Yes.
Mr. Medeiros?
Yes.
Mrs. Pogue?
Yes.
Mr. Yellen?
Yes.
And before I finish, Liza, thank you for all the hard work you've done on that one. It's I know you've worked. I know everyone's been working really hard on this, and I'm hoping there's no more that comes up. Move consent agenda item number 6, item A through C.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Mrs. Brahimai?
Yes.
Mr. Kudo?
Yes.
Mrs. Kingsley?
Yes.
Mr. Medeiros?
Yes.
Mrs. Pogue?
Yes.
Mr. Yellen?
Yes.
Liza,
Anna?
we're particularly happy to see B be passed tonight so we don't get any more emails.
What's B?
Okay.
Look at 6B. I won't call it out by name, but look at 6B later.
Okay. Anna, can you please read number 1?
Oh, I know what it is.
Notice of the Township of Berkeley Heights, County of Union, State of New Jersey, amending and supplementing Title V of the Code of the Township of Berkeley Heights, Business Licenses and Regulations to remove Chapter 5.08 Charitable Solicitations and amend supplement Chapter 5.20 Peddlers and Solicitors.
Now, Anna, to be clear before I continue, it's going to go into public discussion, and then at the end, move the ordinance be read by the clerk after discussion, correct?
Well, we're just introducing it. The public hearing will be on May 26th.
Okay.
So just introduction, just one vote on this one.
Okay.
Great.
And we're having a discussion right now, right?
No, this is just.
No, it's not.
Just an intro?
We're just introducing discussion for the
Okay.
public hearing is on May 26th.
Okay.
So I think I need a, you moved it, Manny? I
Move
need a
that the
second.
ordinance is read by the clerk, be offered for first reading, that May 26th be set as the date for the public hearing, that the clerk be directed to advertise same in the Courier News.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Roll call?
One quick discussion then,
Sure.
since I'm here. Sorry, guys, I'm full of discussions this week. I spoke to Craig on one thing, and I agree strongly that cost savings is important. I know Susan worked really hard on this, trying to keep as much off of Anna's desk as possible. I double checked with the technology side of it, and our internet web-based system can actually support where people register online. It's a private thing, and Liza can confirm it. She'll be controlling the information with Anna, and then Anna has an up-to-date list rather than having people send in names. Because right now it's either an email or by writing, and the name stays on forever. My discussion with Craig is I don't like the fact that the name stays on forever, because if you sign up for a list and you pass, that address is registered until someone happens to find out it's bad. And as long as you're having the peddler come in and pay $95 for his license and for the list, that you're basically selling him a list that bona fide has good information, and you have bad information on this. It might be accurate the first year, but it will not be accurate the second, and even worse the third and fourth year. So I think it should be modified to have a system in place using the internet. And I've spoken to the communication side, that they can put a field on the internet where the homeowner can type in his name, his address. If you want the email, you put the email, and that gets auto-populated to a list that Anna has access to, and Liza will have access to.
I think we talked about this.
That's a matter of whether or not our website has
I
that,
checked and I was told you could.
our Civic Plus website.
Yes. Yeah, I double checked.
We
So
talked
I
about
was
this
told they can.
last time, and we said that writing in to Anna also would mean sending it through the digital system. That's
See,
a
if it goes through
write-in
the
as
digital
well.
system,
Yeah.
but it should be a timeline on this thing to have it expire after
Well,
a year.
that's a lot
no
more
people.
work on Anna to update
It's
that
not
every
in, it
year.
goes through the digital system. But you're selling off a bad list. You're taking $95 from a peddler and you're handing him a list. Once you hand him the list, he's taking his list in good faith. It's accurate. And even though it's a negative list not to call, it's not a good list. It'll be good the first year you have it. It will not be good the second year because of death, divorce, or sale of the property. And the third year, that gets compounded. It's exponential in errors.
But it's incumbent upon the resident to update that. So they'd have.
And if he passes, what happens?
Well, so when they move to town in the welcome packet, it's like, check your address on the website, see if you're on the no knock list. I mean, there are ways that we can do it without people doing it every single year. There are ways that we can figure that out.
I think it's just a system in place that you're giving out wrong information.
Yeah, so just on the technology side, I mean, this is something that I'd be a little hesitant to commit on that particular element right now until we have like that exact system in place that's been tested. Just going through the process of getting our licenses and whatnot online and our permit applications post-COVID was a huge undertaking. So just from that end of things, like the receiving end, I would say like if we can amend the ordinance later to specify that functionality, if that needs to be specified, to maybe go ahead and do that. But I just want to make sure it's a seamless process before it's legislated. You know what I mean?
My personal view would be if we approve the ordinance and then later in the year, if we're finding there are adjustment issues or technological challenges with people signing up for the list, then I would certainly be open at that point down the road to re-looking at aspects of it. But I
It's
think
not people signing up for the list, it's them getting their name off the list. If they sell the property, how many passwords do you not remember that you have to log into sites? And will just be one more password that's going to be on someone else's non-mind, and that you're handing to someone else an address that they're not supposed to knock on a door, but it could be a different owner.
And I understand the concern, but my immediate concern is that this ordinance as a whole is.
Oh, I have no problem with that. That's why I'm not picking on the whole ordinance. I'm just want to clarify that one little window, and that's just for usage because I realize the need for the ordinance. I realize why it's there. I realize what the agreement is. I just want to make sure it's done correctly. So a year from now, 2 years now, 3 years from now, you don't have the same issue with another solicitor coming back and saying, "Wait a second, you made me buy this list. You charged me $95 for this list. Do not call." And I found out that half these people are passed. This address was this guy saw me knocking on the street and he wants me to go talk to him.
So
you
I hear
sold me a bad list.
I hear what you're saying. So we have a year to kind of figure out like a good system, but we can still put it in. We can still put it into place and tweak it because we can always adjust things. So I hear what you're saying.
As long as we agree to tweak this thing later on, and if we can come to an agreement now to have it.
You can tweak anything. That's what this is all about. So we were tweaking something that existed.
But I hate doing a bad agreement, and I'm trusting our attorneys for his work on the First Amendment rights. So I'm not going to mention that. I'm just going right into this one little sniblet that has been my bane since this first came out, because I did mention this 2 weeks ago, and I've never heard back again.
I think that Anna and Craig did talk about it, and Anna's pretty satisfied with the ordinance.
I double checked that, and it's just that the technology end has leapfrogged so well that we can use technology. We already have the list. When you sign up for your alerts on Civic Plus, we can add one more field onto that spot over there, probably, and just have the information go to one person or two people, which will be their clerk, and to a business administrator. And that'll save them, and this way the list is accurate.
Okay, so we're going to tweak the ordinance. We're going to see how it goes and tweak the ordinance. Can I?
That's fine, as long as, again, this is discussion period, I'm going to discuss it.
8 minutes, 9 minutes.
It's past the mayor's bedtime.
Sorry. So yeah, do I have a second, Anna? Did I get a second?
Second, I seconded.
Oh, Susan did, yes.
Susan
Okay.
seconded,
That's
yeah.
the discussion. So roll call, please.
Mrs. Brahimai?
Yeah, no, I'm very much against this. I think we you know, that's something I can do to change it, because it's already an existing ordinance, but I don't think this is necessary at all. And I also think that, you know, we actually ignoring the Supreme Court law and finding a case law, and I think this leaves room for us to be sued in the future. So I'm going to vote no on this.
Mr. Kudo?
Because I'm going to trust our attorneys, our professionals, that it does not violate the First Amendment. I believe that there's good faith on everyone's part to amend this thing, so it's easier for the clerk, so the clerk doesn't have extra work. I'd like to automate as much as possible, and the business administrator will vouch for that. Yes.
Mrs. Kingsley?
Yes.
Mr. Maderos?
Yes.
Mrs. Pogue?
It's for the best of the residents, so I'm going to say yes.
Mr. Yellen?
I also vote yes.
Okay, ordinance number 2.
I move, Anna, can you read number 2, please?
An ordinance of the Township of Berkeley Heights in the County of Union, New Jersey, readopting a redevelopment plan for Block 614, Lot 3, Mandeli property, 180 Plainfield Avenue.
Second.
Second.
Mandy has to say that we're introducing it for first reading and then for the next meeting.
Move that the ordinance is read by the clerk be offered on first reading, that May 26th be set as the date for public hearing, that the clerk be directed to advertise same in the Courier News.
Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Brahimai?
Yes.
Mr. Kudo?
Yes.
Mrs. Kingsley?
Yes.
Mr. Maderos?
Yes.
Mrs. Pogue?
Yes.
Mr. Yellen?
Yes.
Anna, can you read number 3, please?
An ordinance of the Township of Berkeley Heights, County of Union, State of New Jersey, amending the Code of the Township of Berkeley Heights, Appendix A, Municipal Land Use Procedure Ordinance to replace the current ORA and ORA 1 zones with a new mixed-use zone.
Second.
I move that the ordinance is read by the clerk be offered on first reading, and that May 26th be set as a date for the public hearing. The court be directed to advertise same in the Courier News.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Brahimai?
No.
Mr. Kudo?
I'll bring up more discussion next meeting, yes.
Mrs. Kingsley?
On the abundance of caution, I'm recusing myself from this vote.
Mr. Maderos?
I'm going to take a moment just to explain my vote, if I may. First of all, I believe that this is the right right thing to do from a zoning perspective. It enables a design for the future versus trapping Connell in a splintered zoning, which contributes to a poor outcome. Otherwise, Connell could pretty much do everything that most of the public is concerned about based upon the 2017 zoning that was unanimously approved by the town council. The only difference is that they wouldn't build any amenities outside of the 12-acre zoning that they now have. Connell has demonstrated to be a partner to Berkeley Heights with a commitment to excellence and to the community. They have earned our support and partnership. Nothing in this zoning commits Berkeley Heights to anything that does not meet site plan approval to the planning board. As a resident of Twin Falls Road, I can only say that our neighborhood has suffered considerable consequences of Connell development. And I know my neighbors have been disappointed. But I also know that we can work with Connell to ameliorate the worst impacts without detriment to their vision. The township has stepped up to hear Twin Falls Road neighbors' concerns, and our town planner has discussed those with Connell and received a favorable response. I do think that we on Twin Falls Road can coexist with Connell. Many have said that we're creating a second downtown. That may be true, but that's not a bad thing. We don't have the space nor the developer interest in downtown that Connell can deliver, yet we still need the tax revenues and the amenities that they plan. This is not a zero-sum game. I think we can coexist as a township with a more vibrant Connell development. So I vote yes.
Mrs. Pogue?
I had some things I wanted to say, but we're discussing next week, so I'm going to hold back a little bit. I know Mrs. Illis had some questions, and I do want to address them, but in light of the late hour, we're still going to discussion next week, so I'll save that for next week, and I'm going to vote yes.
And Mr. Yellen?
I entirely share Mrs. Pogue's view on the matter. I will reserve my general thoughts on the matter for the next council meeting. I vote yes.
There is no executive session tonight, and I'm very proud that it is 10:57 and we meet under 11 o'clock. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good
Good night.
night.